Chapter 1209. In truth, I have an idea. At this moment, a hesitant voice came from a corner of the hall, instantly attracting everyone's attention. All the rebel leaders, including Bahram, turned to the speaker. Bahram glanced at the speaker and vaguely recognized him as the leader of a rebel army in the southwest. The Tang people still don't want to stay because we don't speak the same language. We don't understand each other, so we can't naturally communicate with each other. In this battle, we can only understand each other through Milord. As for the lower-ranking soldiers, there's no communication between them, so we naturally can't understand each other. If we can learn the language of the Tang and have them understand us, the two sides will understand each other a little more, and everything will naturally be different. Under everyone's gazes, the rebel army leader with a scar on his left eyebrow said, "This truly is a good idea, but to do this, we need many teachers of the Tang people to teach them the language. Moreover, they will need to traverse mountains and rivers to reach Khorasan. I'm afraid that the Tang people won't agree." Right at this moment, another leader of the revolutionary army spoke. The others in the room also began to hesitate. Only with communication and understanding could the alliance last for a long time. But from Samarkand to Khorasan, as well as the other rebel regions, many language teachers would be needed. Moreover, familiarity with the language would take a long time, and this would be no small expense. The Tang dynasty might not agree. In addition, they also had a vague understanding of the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty was rich and powerful, with powerful soldiers and horses. In terms of living conditions, Khorasan could not even compare to the Tang dynasty. Those teachers of the Tang people who taught the language might not be willing to come to such a distant place. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the hall had a worried look on their faces. "Leave this matter to me." At this moment, Bahram spoke. "The problem of teachers is easy to resolve. We can provide them with funding. As long as there is enough compensation, I'm confident that some Tang people will be willing to come here. As long as we can provide the funding, I'm confident that the Tang dynasty won't stop them. But I'm afraid that this matter will require the agreement of the Tang people." Bahram stood up and walked out of the hall under the expectant and uneasy gazes of the crowd. As for whether it would succeed, Bahram had no confidence. After all, this was a battle between the Khorasani, the rebel army, and the Arabs. Putting aside the worries of Bahram and the rebels, Wang Chong had pushed open the door and entered the conference hall, leaving a trail of snow in his wake. Raising his head, Wang Chong immediately saw Gao Xianji sitting at the conference table in the conference hall. Gao Xianji's head was lowered and his brows were furrowed. It seemed that he had encountered a problem that he could not solve. "Lord Protector General, you were looking for me?" Wang Chong walked into the hall and went straight to the point. Hearing the voice, Gao Xianji's body shook slightly, and he suddenly came back to his senses. "Wang Chong, you're here. Have a seat." "My lord, what happened? Could it be that even with Milord's ability, you can't solve it?" Wang Chong sat down beside Gao Xianji and said, "Does it have to do with the Arabs? With this defeat, the Arabs won't be able to attack for at least a few months. What's there to worry about?" Gao Xianji poured a cup of tea for Wang Chong, but the worry on his brow did not dissipate. "You know that I'm not worried about military matters, but matters outside of military matters are not my strong suit. I came to discuss government affairs with you." "Government affairs?" Wang Chong's brow rose, but he quickly thought of something and smiled. "Milord is worried about Talas?" "Correct." Gao Xianji nodded and got straight to the point. "It's easy to attack a city but difficult to defend it. For this battle to reach this point from Talas has already far surpassed our expectations. But you also know that the situation at Talas is complicated and we're unfamiliar with this place. Moreover, we're severely lacking in manpower. How to manage this place will be a major problem." A deep melancholy appeared in Gao Xianji's eyes as he spoke. This question had been circling around his mind for a very long time, but with a powerful foe at his side, he hadn't had the time to carefully consider it. But now that the Arabs had been defeated, he had no choice but to carefully consider this matter. "Then what does Milord intend?" Wang Chong asked, his expression turning serious. "I still haven't thought about the specifics, but there are only two choices. Either we leave or we stay. We've already achieved our goal in this battle. The Arabs have suffered heavy losses and lost countless experts. For a very long time, they won't be able to spare any attention to the east. Moreover, in this battle, we managed to obtain more than 1 billion taels of gold from the Arabs. The entire imperial court has been shaken by the results of this battle. With this gold, we can return to the court in triumph and win the cheers of everyone. At the same time, we can also obtain a generous pension for the soldiers who died in battle. In all my years of campaigning, this is undoubtedly the best result. Gao Xinji sternly said. But Milord does not intend to retreat, right? Wang Chong said. Gao Xinji faintly smiled and did not deny it. And if we don't want to retreat, we'll have to bear a very large risk. First, we'll be facing the threat of the Arabs at any time. Just 10,000 soldiers won't be enough. Second, we don't speak the same language as the locals, which will always be a major problem. With the threat of the Arabs, both sides will naturally cooperate with sincerity, but there are too many people and the composition of the coalition army is too complex. If our subordinates get into a conflict due to a misunderstanding or are deliberately provoked by others, our current alliance will immediately collapse. In this situation, not only will we lose Khorasan, we will also find it difficult to escape the calamity. When the Tang dynasty advanced into the western regions, it took them nearly 200 years to gain a firm foothold, but even so, the countries of the western regions often wavered and harbored ulterior motives. And the situation in Khorasan is even more complicated than in the western regions. I don't know how long the Tang dynasty will need to gain a firm foothold here. As Anxi Protector General, Gao Xianji understood more than most people. Although last night's battle had utterly crushed the Arab offensive and the entire city was in a state of excitement, Khorasan was privately fraught with worries. Haha, so Milord is worried about how to manage Khorasan? To Gao Xianji's surprise, Wang Chong chuckled, none of the worry on Gao Xianji's face. Gao Xianji raised his head to Wang Chong and gave a slight nod. Milord, be at ease. I have already taken care of everything. Lord Feng will arrive at Khorasan in the next few days. In addition, it won't be long before the great clans of the capital enter Khorasan and set up inns and restaurants, buying and selling silk, tea, porcelain, and mining ores. The trade between the East and the West contains enormous profits. In the past, the Arabs forbade trade, making it very difficult for our people to enter, but as long as we open up our authority here, the great clans will only be the first wave. As long as we have the protection of our army, more and more people will enter Khorasan. Wang Chong faintly smiled, his expression naturally suffused with confidence. As the commander-in-chief of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong not only had to consider the war, but also the aftermath. Wang Chong had long ago made plans and preparations for what Gao Xianji had said. Thump, thump, thump. Just as the two of them were talking, there was a sudden knock on the door. This sudden sound attracted the attention of the two of them. General Wang, General Gao, are you in? A familiar voice came from the other side of the door. Baram? Wang Chong and Gao Xianji glanced at each other in surprise. Come in. In the end, it was Gao Xianji who spoke first. The door opened, and Baram shook off the snow on his body as he walked into the room. Several rebel leaders followed behind him. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji raised their brows in surprise. Baram had brought rebel leaders to pay a visit. This was not a common occurrence. General, Gao Xianji quickly gestured to the seat next to him. Generals, to tell the truth, Baram actually has a request, Wang Chong said. Baram walked up to the table, but he did not sit down. Instead, he respectfully bowed to the two commanders of the Tang dynasty. Gao Xianji was even more flabbergasted. Only Wang Chong glanced at Baram and then at the rebel leaders behind him, vaguely guessing at something. General, if you have a request, please speak. We are allies and we will definitely help if we can. Gao Xianji said to Baram, and Wang Chong nodded. Baram said nothing, only nodded to the rebel leaders behind him. Lord Generals, the Tang dynasty is our firmest and most respected ally. We hope that the Tang dynasty can remain here for a long time, and at the same time, we hope to have an even deeper relationship with the Tang dynasty. The speaker was a rebel leader from near Samarkand. Samarkand was not very far from the western regions, so he had an advantage in terms of language compared to the other rebel leaders. This was also why Bahram had brought him with him. But aren't we already allies? Gao Xianji was flabbergasted, completely confused. We hope to further deepen our friendship. Another leader of the rebel army said, we hope to understand the Tang dynasty a little more. Even so, we do not speak the same language, so we hope that Lord Generals can dispatch some teachers from the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains to teach the Tang language. The third rebel leader stammered and finally spoke of the objective in his heart. Chapter 12:10. General, we know that our request is a little rude. Language communication requires a great deal of time, energy, and money, and we also need to use the resources of generals, but in terms of money, we can afford it. At this moment, Bahram also spoke. The Tang dynasty had already lost many people to help the Khorasani and rebels resist the Arabs. To make such a request at a time like this was somewhat unreasonable and excessive. But Bahram had to say it. Great General Bahram, you've misunderstood. Wang Chong finally stood up from his seat and turned to Gao Xianji. Lord Protector General, are you still worried about the language? Gao Xianji said nothing, only looked at the confused Bahram and the others with a complicated expression. Wang Chong silently smiled. In this alliance, the Khorasani and rebels were far more dependent on the Tang dynasty than the Tang dynasty on the Khorasani and rebels. While Gao Xianji was still worried about the language barrier and the alliance's inability to communicate, the Khorasani and rebels were far more worried than the Tang dynasty. Great General Bahram, commanders, be at ease. I can give you an answer right now. There's no problem. We will use all kinds of resources to quickly establish Tang language schools in Khorasan and other places. Wang Chong faintly smiled. All of them had believed that the matter was over, but they were overjoyed at this news. Wonderful! Many thanks, General. Many thanks, General. All of them were in high spirits. The assimilation of the Chinese language, or rather, the Tang language, had gone much faster and smoother than Wang Chong had expected. After witnessing the power of the Tang dynasty, the rebels felt like they were hungry and thirsty. Wang Chong called over Wan Shuyang and had Wan Shuyang and Gao Xianji decide the specifics together. When he walked out of the room, the blizzard in the sky had completely stopped. Looking at the sky that was gradually clearing up, Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. For some reason, Wang Chong suddenly thought of Su Yiqin in distant Qixi. I wonder how Yiqin is doing? Wang Chong thought to himself. Wang Chong had actually sent letters to Feng Chongqing, the great clans, and Su Yiqin to discuss the political affairs of Khorasan. But for some reason, only Su Yiqin had not replied, even though the supplies had never been cut off. This kind of situation had never happened before, so Wang Chong couldn't help but worry. I hope Yiqin is fine. Wang Chong thought for a moment and quickly entered the study. A moment later, a messenger pigeon soared into the sky and quickly disappeared in the northeast direction. In the distant Qixi, in a house in the northwest, the winter plum blossoms were blooming, their fragrance wafting through the air. Behind the plum blossoms, a white-clothed woman with a sickly and pale complexion was leaning against an open window, lightly sniffing the plum blossoms. Young lady, you should close the window. The air is cold and your body is still weak. You should rest. A maid's voice came from behind her, tinged with concern and concern. It's fine. Su Yiqin waved a finger that had become much thinner. I can still endure it. It's rare for me to get some fresh air, so let me take a look. Girl, don't try to persuade her. Your young lady has been locked up in her room for so long. It's rare for her to feel a little better and be willing to open the window for some fresh air. Just let her be. In at most 5 minutes, we'll close the window. The voice of a middle-aged woman came from behind her, tinged with warmth. Come, Lady Su. I've cooked a bowl of ginger soup. Drink it while it's hot. You won't feel so cold. As soon as he finished speaking, a middle-aged woman dressed in plain clothes and a cotton dress with thorns on it walked to the window with a bowl of ginger soup in her hands and handed it to Su Yiqin beside her. Madam Feng, thank you. Su Yiqin turned her head and took the bowl of ginger soup, a look of gratitude on her face. Madame Feng was naturally the wife of Feng Changqing's Dr. Feng, the wall of the Empire of Anxi. While Wang Chong and Gao Xianji were fighting on the front lines, Su Yiqin and Feng Changqing were responsible for all the matters in the rear, including the logistics. Su Yiqin's illness could be concealed from others, but it could not be concealed from the meticulous Feng Changqing. Upon learning that Su Yiqin was ill, Feng Changqing had quickly dispatched his wife and several renowned doctors from the western regions to the Qixi Protectorate headquarters to take care of Su Yiqin. It was only thanks to the methods of those renowned doctors and Madame Feng's consideration and care that Su Yiqin managed to survive. Although she still hadn't fully recovered, her entire body was much better. As she watched Su Yiqin finish her bowl of ginger soup, Madame Feng's face finally relaxed. But then she thought of something and said, "Lady Su, in truth, there's no need for this. Even now, the young Marquis still hasn't learned of your illness. In truth, as long as you tell him, I'm confident that he'll quickly come to Qixi. That's exactly what I don't want." Su Yiqin shook her head, dazedly gazing out the window at the dark red plum blossoms. No matter how many things a girl has to deal with, they can't compare to the important affairs of the country. Wang Chong is fighting on the front lines with Lord Gao. I don't want to distract him because of my matters. But shouldn't you at least write a letter to him? Madame Feng asked, her gaze fixed on the letter in Su Yiqin's hand. This was a letter that Wang Chong had sent from Khorasan not too long ago. She could sense that Su Yiqin liked Wang Chong, but for some reason she had been suppressing herself, not even willing to write a letter. Su Yiqin shook her head. Wang Chong recognizes my handwriting. If I write a letter, he'll be able to quickly tell from my handwriting that I've fallen ill. At that time, all my efforts will have been for naught. Madame Feng was dumbfounded. She could no longer speak. She had only known that Su Qi was unwilling to write a letter, but she hadn't expected this. As she gazed at Su Yiqin's pale and determined expression, Madame Feng could only give a long sigh. The three of them were silent in the room. Flap flap. As Su Yiqin was staring out the window in a daze, she heard the flapping of wings in the distance. Su Yiqin raised her head and saw a white carrier pigeon flying through the sky, quickly descending from the northwest and landing in front of the window. Madame Feng and Xiao Zhu also looked over and immediately saw the golden insignia on the carrier pigeon's right leg. It was a letter from the young Marquis. The two of them recognized it at a glance. After serving at Su Yiqin's side for so long, the two of them were extremely familiar with the carrier pigeon that Wang Chong had used to deliver his message. In front of the window, Su Yiqin clearly recognized it as well. She lightly held up the carrier pigeon, a faint blush on her face. In the distant Uzan Plateau, the land was covered in white snow. From Khorasan to Samarkand, through Anxi, Qixi, and Longxi, the Central Plains was in a frenzy, basking in the joy of victory, but the Uzan Plateau was currently immersed in sorrow and heaviness. The wind and snow had still not completely died down. Strand by strand, they drifted through the air like snapped strings of beads. In the middle of the blizzard, the most revered imperial minister of the Uzan Empire, Dalen Trinling, was wrapped in a snowy fur coat, his face grief-stricken. At his side, countless guards of the royal capital gripped their spears and halberds as they closely followed. Even the supreme ruler of the plateau, the Tsenpo, who rarely left the royal palace, was standing at his side. To the entire Uzan Empire, this was fated to be an extremely important day. It was not because of the extreme cold and the blizzard that had frozen countless cattle and sheep to death, but because of the people lying on brown mats on the icy ground. Daluan Ruozan, Huishu Wizong, and Dusong Mangpoch. The empire had just suffered the heaviest loss in its history, losing its most important minister and two generals. Their corpses had finally arrived at the royal capital of the Uzan Empire. "Rosen, why is it like this?" Dalen Trinling slowly walked over and kneeled down next to Daluan Ruozan, his face brimming with grief. "You privately mobilized the Mutri Great Cavalry, borrowed the soldiers of the Yarlung royal lineage, and contacted Dusong Mangpoch. Did you really think that I didn't know? Without my permission, did you really think that you could have taken these soldiers away? Why were you such a fool?" How could the Tsenpo and I blame you? Dalen Trinling's heart trembled as he gazed at that pale face, his eyes tightly shut, his face devoid of blood. He had ruled over this empire for more than a decade, commanded an army at the age of 12, fought against the Tang dynasty, and made a name for himself throughout the world. Dalen Trinling's heart had never been disturbed, but at this moment, great waves were raging in his heart, and he could no longer maintain his usual calm. Imperial Minister, you have to take revenge for the Prime Minister and the General. At this moment, a voice rang out in his ear. Huaba Senji's eyes were scarlet as he clenched his teeth and crawled to Dalen Trinling's side, his face brimming with grief and indignation. The Prime Minister and the General died so miserably. No matter what, we have to make the Tang people pay the price. Slap. Before Huaba Senji could finish speaking, a slap landed on his face, the enormous force causing half his face to swell up. Imperial Minister. Huaba Senji held his swollen cheek, dumbfounded by Dalen Trinling's slap. Bastard! If not for your stubbornness, would the Mutri Great Cavalry have suffered such heavy losses? As the commander of the royal capital, you didn't even ask for my or the Tsenpo's orders before taking your soldiers and leaving. Do you still have any respect for the Tsenpo? Huashu Wizong and Dusong Mangpoj are fine, but Daluan Ruozan is only a civil minister. Your defeat is fine, but you can't even bring back a civil minister like Daluan Ruozan. Chapter 12:11. Imperial Minister. Huaba Senji knelt on the ground. When he heard this, he lowered his head. Huaba Senji knows that his sins are grave. If the Imperial Minister and the Tsenpo want my life, Huaba Senji will not say a word. But I cannot die. The deaths of Prime Minister and the two generals have not been avenged. Huaba Senji is not willing to die, nor can he die. Huaba Senji placed his hands on his knees, his shoulders trembling. Finally, he could no longer hold back his tears. These were not tears, but blood. Hearing this, everyone in the surroundings fell silent, and their expressions were extremely gloomy. Huaba Senji truly deserved to be killed, but leaving him alive would be an even greater punishment than death. All was quiet as Dalen Trinling stared at Huaba Senji, the killing intent in his eyes finally receding. Huaba Senji, I will leave your lowly life behind for now. Dalen Trinling raised his head and slowly closed his eyes, concealing the killing intent in them. However, an even more powerful baleful aura began to slowly erupt from his body. Wang Chong, the Wang clan, and the Tang dynasty, just wait. I will definitely make all of you pay the price and have all of you feel the pain of our Uzun. The world was still, and Dalen Trinling's voice drifted through the air into the endless distance. Putting aside the activity on the Uzun plateau, Karasan was currently rejoicing. Chongqing, you've come. At the eastern gate of Karasan, Gao Xianji was elated to see the robed figure of Feng Changqing. For the first time, the twin jades of the Tang dynasty had met on foreign soil. With Feng Changqing, Gao Xianji could finally put down the government affairs that had been weighing on his mind and leave them to Feng Changqing to handle. Milord. Feng Changqing was also elated to see Gao Xianji. Whether it was the Battle of Talas or the Battle of Karasan, Feng Changqing had spent his days and nights in Suye, worrying and worrying. Now, he could finally relax. The two twin paragons of the empire had reunited, and they had begun to talk about Anxi, Suye, and the Anxi Protectorate Army. After the two of them ended their conversation, Feng Changqing straightened his clothes and walked towards Wang Chong. Lord Feng, we meet again. Before Feng Changqing could speak, Wang Chong broke the silence with a smile. Lord Protector General, words cannot express my gratitude. Please accept my bow. Feng Changqing said with a straight face and bowed respectfully. Lord Feng, there's no need to thank me when it comes to national affairs. Wang Chong faintly smiled, but he did not extend a hand to help. But Feng Changqing was actually unable to continue bowing. An enormous stellar energy was supporting him, making it impossible for him to even bend his waist. Feng Changqing tried several more times, but his face was red, and in the end, he could only give up. Changqing, enough. Given Wang Chong's personality, if he's not willing, you won't be able to give this bow. Let's go. Karasan is busy, so let's talk inside. Gao Xianji heartily laughed. With a bitter expression, Feng Changqing could only give up. In a certain inner hall of Karasin, guards were standing guard outside. Other than Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, and Cheng Qianli, not even Li Sai was allowed to enter. Lord Feng, this is the strategy for managing Karasin that I have prepared. Please take a look. I'm afraid that you will have to deal with the specifics of Karasin in the future. This is also the primary reason I invited you to come to Karasin. The mood in the room was solemn, and Wang Chong got straight to the point. He took a small letter from his sleeve and handed it over. The management of Karasin was not just related to the success or failure of a single city, but also to the Tang dynasty's suppression of Arabia. Besides that, it was also related to Wang Chong's larger plan. Feng Changqing did not dare to be negligent when it came to the political affairs of Karasin. With just a glance, Feng Changqing couldn't help but raise his brow. He sat up straight, his expression unprecedentedly serious, and as he continued to read, he became more and more alarmed. As an important minister of the empire and logistics, Feng Changqing never did anything that he did not prepare for. It was part of Feng Changqing's duty to plan for a rainy day and think 3 steps before taking 1 step. Thus, before coming here, Feng Changqing had carefully considered many things. Through his many years of experience and ability in government affairs, Feng Changqing believed that he had already thought through the strategy for managing Karasin in great detail. But when he compared himself to Wang Chong, Feng Changqing finally felt the gap. This was not because he was too weak, but because Wang Chong had a completely different way of thinking. The hall was quiet. After a long time, Feng Changqing finally put down the letter in his hand and let out a long sigh, recovering from the initial shock. Feng Changqing's heart was in turmoil as he looked at the young man before him, who was only 17 or 18 years old, a face that was both mature and experienced through the fires of war. Hearing was not as good as seeing, and seeing was far better than hearing one's reputation. Everyone acknowledged Wang Chong's military ability, but Feng Changqing had never imagined that he would also be so formidable in political affairs and operations. So, Lord Protector General, you have already prepared everything. You will soon form a decree with all the people of Khorasani and the rebel army. Feng Changqing raised his head to look at Wang Chong. Wang Chong faintly smiled and nodded. Decree? Changqing, what decree are you talking about? Cheng Qianli couldn't help but ask. Feng Changqing didn't say anything. He just handed over the letter in his hand. Establish the headquarters of the coalition army in Karasin. The Sassanids and the various rebel armies will serve the Tang dynasty as their master, and the Tang dynasty will support the Sassanid dynasty and the rebel armies in establishing their own power. Moreover, when the coalition army is attacked by the Arabs, the Tang dynasty has the duty to gather all its soldiers to help resist the Arabs, and the coalition army must respond to the call. In return, the coalition army will agree to follow the orders of the Tang dynasty and provide funds for the garrisons of the armies in the coalition army. If any coalition army goes against the Tang dynasty and the coalition army, the Tang dynasty will gather all the coalition army to suppress it. Cheng Qianli frowned as he read the first clause on the letter. Changqing, isn't this a normal matter for the coalition army? Is there something special about it? The Tang dynasty hoped to borrow the strength of the rebel armies to deal with the Arabs, and the rebel armies hoped to deepen their relationship with the Tang dynasty. This had become a common understanding in Karasin, and even the ordinary soldiers had probably sensed it. Cheng Qianli didn't understand why Feng Changqing cared so much about this. Feng Changqing said nothing, only glanced at Wang Chong. Wang Chong smiled, only took a sip of tea from his teacup. Qianli, do you still not understand? This is no ordinary mobilization of the coalition army. With this decree, the Tang dynasty will forever be able to take root in the region west of the Tsong Mountains, from Samarkand to Karasin. Feng Changqing sighed as he looked at Wang Chong and sincerely praised. On this journey from Suya, I thought of many strategies, piecemeal and intricate, but in the end, none of them could compare to Lord Protector General's simple decree. Feng Changqing was sincerely convinced. Upon seeing Wang Chong's letter, Feng Changqing suddenly had a feeling that perhaps there really were geniuses in this world. Their perception were extremely sharp, and with just a few words, they were able to accomplish 1,000 things with little effort, turning a difficult mission into a simple one. Lord Feng's praise is too much. I just knew that I couldn't hide it from you. Wang Chong faintly smiled as he put down his teacup. It was much easier to speak with smart people. Wang Chong had actually already submitted this decree to Barum, the rebel armies, and Gao Xinji. Many people were like Feng Changqing, treating this decree as a simple strategy for the allied army. Very few people understood the true intent behind Wang Chong's decree. Changqing, just what are you talking about? Even Gao Xinji couldn't help but ask as he listened to the silent conversation between Wang Chong and Feng Changqing. Both of them had confused looks on their faces. They had invited Feng Changqing over to deal with government affairs, but for some reason, they were talking about military affairs. "Milord, do you still not understand? As long as this decree is passed, the Tang dynasty will be the true ruler from Khorasan to Samarkand." Feng Changqing gave a long sigh as he explained. According to the contents of the agreement, the Tang dynasty will not only receive an endless stream of taxes, it will also be able to mobilize the soldiers of the allied army. Any action that offends or resists the Tang dynasty will be attacked by the soldiers of the allied army. As long as this is established, no one will be able to shake the Tang dynasty's position to the west of the Tsong Mountains. As long as we reach this point, all other government affairs are just trifles. If this is carried out, in less than 10 years, the Tang dynasty will be even more stable in Khorasan than it was in the western regions. The room was deathly silent. Everyone was shocked by Feng Changqing's words. They were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. From Feng Changqing's reaction, they could tell that this decree was not simple, but no one had expected Feng Changqing to view it so highly. It had taken the Tang dynasty 200 years to gain a firm foothold in the western regions, but Feng Changqing was saying that the Tang dynasty would be able to do the same in 10 years, and that it would be even more stable than in the western regions. This was simply inconceivable. If anyone else had said this, no one would have taken them seriously, but the one saying this was Feng Changqing, one of the important officials of the Tang dynasty renowned for his wisdom and foresight. 10 years? Changqing, aren't you exaggerating a little too much? The Tang dynasty had so many capable officials and generals in the western regions, but not one of them managed to do it. Can a single decree do it? Cheng Qianli couldn't help but say. It wasn't that he doubted Feng Changqing, nor was it that he didn't believe in Wang Chong. It was just that 10 years was far too astonishing and difficult to believe. A single decree naturally can't do it, but with the second decree, it's completely different. Lord Protector General, I am truly convinced. You have opened schools in Khorasan and taught the Tang language not just to increase the understanding between the two armies, right? Chapter 12:12. Translated by Hypersheep 325, Lord Feng is truly formidable. Correct. One decree is naturally not enough. Only the final decree can completely alter the situation in Khorasan. In truth, I am more concerned about the promotion of the Tang dynasty's language in Khorasan. This is the true foundation upon which the Tang dynasty can establish a foothold here. This is also what I hope that Lord Feng will vigorously promote once he takes over Khorasan. Not just in Khorasan, but in all the regions surrounding Arabia. I hope to vigorously promote the Tang language, and if possible, I hope to penetrate deep into Arabia. Wang Chong lightly tapped his finger on the table as he spoke in a firm voice. Only Wang Chong himself knew that he placed far greater importance on the dissemination and teaching of the Tang language in Khorasan than anything else. In this world, there was hard power, the military. There was also soft power, culture. And in order to understand a country, language played an extremely important role. Only by spreading the language of the Tang dynasty to Samarkand, Khorasan, and even the Arabian capital, Baghdad, could the culture of the Tang dynasty seep into these places. Only by learning the language could one gain a deeper understanding of the Tang dynasty, and only by gaining a deeper understanding could one develop admiration for the Tang dynasty and ultimately accept the Tang dynasty. This was the true foundation upon which the Tang dynasty could establish a foothold here, but Wang Chong was not prepared to explain too much. "Milord, be at ease. Once I take over, I will make this matter a priority," Feng Changqing solemnly said. The two of them were in complete agreement on this point. Feng Changqing had studied the history of the Western regions, and he knew that the Tang dynasty had its flaws in the Western regions. Although the Tang dynasty had taken root in the Western regions for more than 200 years, its policies had been too conciliatory, causing the kingdoms of the Western regions to lack unity. All sorts of undercurrents were surging in the shadows, and opportunistic behavior continued to persist despite repeated prohibitions. This was because the seeds had been planted, so no matter how smart the people who came after were, no matter how courageous, ambitious, or crafty they were, they would find it very difficult to change this fact. Feng Changqing's heart was as clear as a mirror. He knew this point like the back of his hand, but he could not say it because it involved the imperial court. But now, for the first time, Feng Changqing met a soulmate who knew the shortcomings of the Tang dynasty like the back of his hand. In Khorasan, to the west of the Tsong Mountains, the Tang dynasty finally had a chance to make a comeback. Using its powerful military as its backing, it established a firm position as the hegemon and a stable alliance. In the end, it avoided the mistake it had made in the western regions and firmly controlled this region. This also made Feng Changqing feel a sense of kinship with Wang Chong. 1,000 gold pieces are easy to come by, but a bosom friend is hard to find. The matters of government affairs were always fragmented. Feng Changqing used his knowledge to explain these matters clearly to everyone. Finally, everyone in the hall came to a sudden realization. When all the discussions were over, Feng Changqing purposely left Wang Chong at the end. "Master Feng, is there anything else?" Wang Chong asked, a look of surprise on his face. An old friend has asked me to deliver something." Feng Changqing faintly smiled and took out a small wooden box. Under Wang Chong's flabbergasted gaze, Feng Changqing quickly left the hall. Wang Chong was perplexed as he opened the wooden box. There was nothing inside, only a familiar jade hairpin. "Chi-chin." Wang Chong froze for a moment, a strange emotion stirring in his heart. Wang Chong quickly handed over all the affairs of Khorasan to Feng Changqing. With this capable official of the Tang dynasty, everything in Khorasan was in order, and even the affairs of the coalition army were in order. But what surprised Wang Chong the most was that Feng Changqing was fluent in Arabic. Wang Chong had never expected this. Feng Changqing's explanation for this was to prepare for a rainy day. Although even Gao Xianji had underestimated the Arabs, Feng Changqing had always felt the threat of Arabia. Moreover, he had begun to learn Arabic very early on, and it had only taken him a short time to master it. But Feng Changqing's knowledge of Arabic reduced many of his problems, and he was able to communicate with the Khorasani and rebel soldiers without the slightest hindrance. Time slowly passed, and with Feng Changqing's handling and Wang Chong's plans, all the measures were quickly promulgated. Once the Tang dynasty took over Khorasan, the first thing it did was abolish the numerous taxes of the Arabian Empire. In addition, it announced that all taxes would be waived for the first 3 years, and after 3 years, even if taxes were needed to maintain daily operations, they would be paid less than 30% of what they had been under the Arabian Empire. The announcement of this policy caused an uproar in Khorasan. At the same time, the Tang dynasty's status and influence in the coalition army caused the people of Khorasan to have a favorable impression of the Tang dynasty. Not only that, Feng Changqing used a portion of the gold he had obtained from the caliph to repair the city and help repair the homes that had been damaged in the fires of war. At the same time, the Tang dynasty had dispatched a large number of soldiers to coordinate with the Khorasani and rebel soldiers to form small groups that patrolled the city to reassure the people. Besides that, Feng Changqing had made ample preparations before entering Khorasan. Through the scouts he had dispatched, Feng Changqing had discovered that Khorasan was sorely lacking in handicrafts. Even if they were available on the market, they were products of the Tang dynasty and were extremely expensive. Thus, Feng Changqing had brought 30 caravans, all of them carrying various kinds of handicrafts. As wave after wave of handicrafts entered Khorasan, the people of Khorasan immediately developed a favorable impression of the Tang dynasty, a country of the East that they had never even heard of. But after all these policies, there was one policy that attracted very little attention. The schools. under the leadership of Wan Shuyang and the many disciples he had taught in the western regions, and with the military and financial might of the Tang dynasty as their backing, Tang language schools were quickly established throughout Khorasan. The schools primarily accepted children, but of course, adults were also included. According to the rules of the schools, as long as one studied diligently, the schools would not only provide for all 3 meals a day, but they would also receive a large subsidy from the Tang dynasty. These schools had never existed in Khorasan before, and at the start, the people were still skeptical. But with the assistance of Bahram and the rebel leaders, the schools quickly recruited a first batch of more than 800 students. Although it was not a lot, for a new policy, as long as they could set the first footprint on this strange soil, they could start a wildfire in the future and thoroughly spread the Tang language here. And according to Wang Chang's plan, even more schools were being constructed, and everything proceeded in an orderly and vigorous manner. But just when all this was going on, a sudden matter attracted the attention of Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, and all the other higher-ups. "Is this the place?" Wang Chong said as he looked forward. "This is the place." A Khorasani soldier got down on one knee and respectfully said. In the minds of the Khorasani, Wang Chong's status and influence were probably on par with Bahram's, and in some aspects, he even surpassed him. Wang Chong said nothing, quickly turning his head to look at that circular pit with a diameter of 2 meters and an unknown depth. Wang Chong probed it, but even with his psychic energy, he was unable to see just how deep this pitch-black pit was. "Tell me again. Just how did this happen?" One of the rebel army leaders spoke up once more. This blizzard was larger than any in the past, and the snow on the ground was also very thick. When we were shoveling the snow, a man was standing there, but before he could shovel the snow, the ground began to cave in and he fell down. Our people heard the news and wanted to go down to rescue him, but when they entered, the ground caved in again, and we realized that the pit was much deeper than we had imagined. Several soldiers fell down, but none of them came out. Later on, we put down ropes, but for some reason, not long after we went down, they all fell down. We didn't dare to make a decision on our own, so we reported it. The guard knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Then why did the nearby people say that they heard the howls of devils?" Bahram suddenly interjected. "I don't know. We came quite late. I only heard from the surrounding people that when the hole first appeared, there was black gas coming out, accompanied by golden flames and demon-like howls. But when we got here, we didn't see anything." The guard bowed. Bahram's brow furrowed even deeper at these words. Unlike in the Central Plains, demon gods were not just legends, but existences that the people deeply believed in and revered. In the hearts of the people, devils truly existed. Any place with black energy and the howls of devils was fated to be extraordinary. "Great General, let me go down first. I can also save the others." A voice rang out by his ear. A commander of the Revolutionary Army took 2 steps forward and was about to jump into the pit to investigate. "Wait a moment. This matter isn't urgent." At this moment, Wang Chong waved his hand behind him. "Senior Zhang, I'll leave this matter to you. Take care of this pit, and then we'll go in." "Understood." Zhang Shouji nodded. He quickly called over a few disciples and had them set up several blowers for smelting steel to the side. Then, pipes made of dense cloth and steel rings were lowered into the pit. 6 blowers then blew air inwards, dredging the air into the depths of the pit. This kind of pit, which had been sealed for a long time, would be filled with all kinds of unbreathable waste gas and turbid air. Therefore, the guards and generals who rushed over fell into the pit as soon as they entered, without any signs of life. The moment Wang Chong arrived, he knew that he could not recklessly enter this sort of place. Chapter 12:13. It's about time. Around an hour later, while the 6 blowers were still working, Wang Chong leaped into the pit. Behind him, Bahram, Gao Xinji, and the others followed. As expected, not far from the ground, Wang Chong's 10 fingers were thrust into the wall like pincers as he stared at it. Although the pit was pitch black, imperial great generals of Wang Chong's level all possessed the ability to see in the dark. On the walls of the cavern, Wang Chong could clearly see a mural. Unlike the other murals, this mural had been poured out of molten metal, and it was deeply embedded into the wall. Strangely, this molten metal was the same dark red as blood. Wang Chong only needed a few glances to immediately recognize it. This was the result of a large amount of human blood being poured into the molten metal. As a veteran commander of the Azura army, Wang Chong would never make a mistake. The murals were heavily influenced by the Sassanid dynasty, and Wang Chong could only make out the images of demons with horns on their heads and the human corpses behind them. Demon God. In an instant, a strong smell mixed with a strong aura of death assaulted his senses. Unlike what the guard outside had said, the mural in this pit was the true reason Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, and Bahram had appeared here. The Central Plains did not have many legends of demon gods, but here everyone firmly believed that demon gods truly existed. This is an ancient ruin. From the words on the wall, they should be from the era of the Elam dynasty. A familiar voice came from Bahram's side. His hands were thrust into the wall, and just like Wang Chong, he was also examining this bizarre mural. What are the words on the wall? Gao Xianji curiously asked from the other side of the pit, above Wang Chong and Bahram. I don't know. Bahram shook his head, his expression grave. But I can recognize what the murals are trying to convey. This is a forbidden area, and entry is strictly forbidden. Bahram's words caused the pit to fall silent, an indescribable feeling in everyone's hearts. Every empire and every region had their own ancient legends and civilizations. These powerful civilizations had long disappeared in history, but they had left their traces and wreckage in the dust of history. Evidently, the Elam dynasty was one of them. Let's go. Bahram circulated his stellar energy and began to investigate. Behind him, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji glanced at each other before swiftly climbing down the walls. The deeper one went into the pit, the darker it became. Waves of turbid air assaulted one's face, almost suffocating. It was also at this time that everyone understood why Wang Chong used a blower to blow air into the building. No one spoke as they climbed down. After some time, Wang Chong's body loosened, and he swiftly descended into the pit. So high! Wang Chong looked up. From this angle, the hole was only the size of a sesame seed. Wang Chong estimated that the bottom of the pit was at least several hundred meters from the ground. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly looked forward. The bottom of the pit was different from what they had imagined. Not only was it not narrow or cramped, it was actually a massive natural cavern. The cavern was 20 meters high and extremely spacious. The surface of the cavern was uneven and mottled, and a dark green light was seeping out of the cracks. At first glance, Wang Chong noticed an enormous black silhouette within the cavern. It was actually a huge palace. How is this possible? Gao Xianji's voice came from behind Wang Chong. When he saw this well-preserved ancient palace, he was also stunned speechless. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have never believed that there were palaces of an ancient dynasty here that had been lost for so long. Unlike the Khorasan that Wang Chong and the others had seen above, these palaces were simple and majestic. The first thing they saw were 12 massive pillars, and unlike those of the Tang dynasty, Khorasan, and Arabia, these palaces were all forged from pure bronze. The dark green light they had seen underground was mostly exuded by these bronze palaces. Impossible! Wang Chong was also examining these palaces. Everything here exuded a completely different style, and the heavy aura of history in the air seemed to pull him back through time and space to the Elam era of the Sassanid dynasty, several thousand years ago. It really is a ruin from the Elam dynasty. The surroundings were filled with praises. The other leaders of the revolutionary army also descended into the pit. Looking at the well-preserved ancient ruins, they were all shocked. Just as everyone was sizing up the underground palace complex, a crisp sound suddenly rang out. It was extremely ear-piercing in this underground world. In an instant, everyone looked over and saw a general of the revolutionary army standing in front of a corpse not too far away. Judging from his expression, he seemed to have been shocked by the corpse he had stepped on. It's the fallen rebel soldiers. Wang Chong's brow rose as he quickly recognized this corpse. Besides this corpse, there were 7 or 8 other corpses nearby. From the armor on their bodies, he could tell that these were the people who had fallen earlier. Moreover, some of these corpses were very far from where they had fallen. It seemed like they had discovered these ancient ruins before their deaths and wanted to continue onward to investigate. But their heavy injuries prevented them from doing so. Let's go. Let's go and take a look. A rebel leader was the first to react, stepping over the corpses and walking forward. The dead were gone, but the living still existed. The lives of these lost soldiers could no longer be salvaged. For everyone, the most important thing was to understand these underground ancient ruins. After this rebel leader took the lead and walked forward, Wang Chong and Gao Xinji followed suit. What a strange place. As Wang Chong walked, he carefully observed his surroundings. Everything here gave him a very novel feeling. Personally witnessing an ancient ruin was something that even Wang Chong had never experienced before. As he carefully walked forward, with the help of the weak green light, Wang Chong saw more and more bronze murals on the walls of the underground cave. Every single one of them was different. But what was similar was that almost every single one of them had the image of a demon god. At the same time, it was accompanied by human bones and corpses. The thick stench of blood and death in the murals was so strong that it was suffocating. Wang Chong, don't you think these murals are very strange? A voice rang out. Wang Chong turned his head and saw Gao Xinji stopping in front of a large bronze mural with a frown. What's wrong? Wang Chong was surprised as he walked over. At first glance, these murals seemed to be scenes of demon gods slaughtering humans. But if you look closely, do you realize that almost all the demon gods have their backs to the humans? Gao Xinji said with a slight frown. Oh! Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He followed Gao Xinji's gaze and saw that the demon god on this mural was much taller than the other demon gods. Behind him were also endless bones and corpses. But unlike the other murals, behind the demon god on this mural were a few surviving humans. They were all looking at the demon god's back without any expression on their faces. After hearing Gao Xinji's words, Wang Chong quickly noticed the difference. If the demon god was slaughtering humans, it should be facing the humans. Lord Gao, what do you mean? The humans on these murals may not be killed by the demon god as we imagined. These demon gods are facing a stronger threat. Wang Chong frowned and said thoughtfully. For a moment, both of them were silent. In everyone's imagination, the demon god slaughtering humans was a matter of course. But if the humans on the murals were not killed by the demon god, then they seemed to have thought of something and their brows furrowed even deeper. Look over here. At that moment, a loud cry rang out. Not far away, a rebel leader stared at a mark on the wall with a shocked look on his face. This is the symbol of the 72 demon god pillars. Buzz. The crowd was stunned by these words and began to gather around the symbol. Baram was the first to reach the mural, and Wang Chong and Gao Xinji glanced at each other before rushing over. In the crack between one of the murals, Wang Chong and Gao Xinji could clearly see the symbol of a golden goat. But unlike ordinary goats, this golden goat had 3 horns on its head, each of them extremely sharp and pointed straight at the sky. And if one looked carefully, one would also realize that this goat had a pair of golden vertical pupils that gave it an extremely callous appearance. Wang Chong pensively stared at the golden symbol on the wall. To the west of the Tsong Mountains, the 72 demon god pillars were extremely famous. Abu Muslim's martial arts had come from the 72 demon god pillars, and the martial arts that Governor Osman had used to escape his pursuit had also come from the 72 demon god pillars. In this world, the 72 demon god pillars had an extremely long history. Unbelievable! The Elam dynasty and the legend of the 72 demon god pillars don't even exist in the same era. Why would they have a legend of the 72 demon god pillars? A revolutionary army leader stared at the demon god mark on the wall, his eyes filled with shock. Chapter 12:14. There are many 72 demon god pillars, but the majority of the legends say that the 72 demon god pillars were sealed in the sea long before the Elam dynasty. Moreover, the legends say that the Elam dynasty was the most pious civilization to the gods and extremely powerful. Later on, for some reason, it vanished in a single night, its entire kingdom destroyed. The Elam dynasty left behind very few ruins, but as long as they are related to power, the majority of them are incredibly powerful. But it is precisely because of this that everyone is confused about the cause of the Elam dynasty's destruction. Bahram walked up to the pair and explained, a familiar voice resounding in their ears. The ancient civilization of the Sassanid dynasty was only understood by the Sassanids and the people of the surrounding regions. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji clearly knew nothing about it. More and more seals of the 72 demon god pillars appeared in the cave, and as Bahram explained, the pair began to understand more and more about the 72 demon god pillars and the Elam dynasty. The group quickly finished exploring the outer edge of the cave. Many of the rebel soldiers turned their attention to the most conspicuous palace complex in the cave. Wang Chong was also preparing to enter the palace complex, but as he turned, his eyes flitted over an unremarkable seal on the wall. Bzz. Wang Chong's body trembled, his pupils constricting, and he stopped. This is... Wang Chong stared at the faint black seal of an eye on the wall, and deep within the eye's pupil was the symbol of a human with its arms and legs spread out. Unlike the golden seals of the 72 demon god pillars, this symbol was far less conspicuous, and it was also located in the darkness where light could not reach. If one did not look carefully, they would find it very difficult to notice. At first glance, this black eye seal was unremarkable, but when Wang Chong looked a second time, the eye on the wall seemed to come to life. When Wang Chong looked at it, it stared back at Wang Chong. It gave off an extremely cold and bizarre feeling. But this was not the only thing that left Wang Chong stunned. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Wang Chong's eyes were wide open as he stared at the mark in the underground cavern. His mind was instantly filled with great waves. Wang Chong was no stranger to this mark. Wang Chong had seen this mark when the catastrophe broke out. Moreover, Wang Chong had investigated back then and found that this mark was inextricably linked to the catastrophe of that year. The mark on the wall was not exactly the same as the one in Wang Chong's memory, but it was at least 70 to 80% similar. Even if it was not the one in Wang Chong's memory, there was definitely a strong connection. But one was the seal of the Central Plains while the other was the seal of the ancient Elam dynasty in the distant Khorasan, separated by thousands of years, so why did the seal he had seen in the apocalyptic era of the Central Plains appear here? At this moment, Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Watch out! User has discovered the seal of destiny and has touched the riddle of destiny. The stone of destiny's urgent voice rang out in Wang Chong's mind, and at the same time, the riddle of destiny reward extended from Wang Chong's mind began to rapidly flash. Wang Chong instantly activated the ability of the riddle of destiny. Obtain more information from the riddle of destiny. Request denied. User needs more information in order to unravel the secret of the seal. To his surprise, Wang Chong's request was immediately denied. In a daze, Wang Chong tried again, once, twice, thrice, but the option of the riddle of destiny remained unmoved. After some time, Wang Chong finally gave up, but his mind was still in turmoil. After winning the Battle of Talas, he had managed to find clues in this foreign land that might be connected to the calamity that was to come. Although he didn't know what had happened from the vanished Elam dynasty, there was a high chance that he would be able to find the truth behind the otherworldly invaders. Buzz. In the darkness, an astonishing light flashed through Wang Chong's mind. His mind trembled, and his entire body instantly became extremely focused. He no longer had the mentality of being purely curious and adventurous. The books of the Elam dynasty. There are books of the Elam dynasty here. At this moment, an excited shout came from the palace complex in the distance. Upon hearing this news, Wang Chong's heart thumped, and he immediately leaped out. In a few seconds, he had traversed space and reached the bronze palace complex of the Elam dynasty, where the voice had come from. There were many utensils in this palace complex, all of them bearing the deep imprint of the Elam dynasty era. But none of these objects could compare to an ancient book placed on a bronze sacrificial altar in the center of this palace complex. As Wang Chong hurried over, he could clearly see that this book had a thick bronze cover. The book was already open, but after so many years, the pages within were showing signs of decay and destruction. In many places, only half a page remained. This book has the symbol of the 72 demon god pillars, the seal of Paimon. It's rumored that Paimon would only leave this seal on personal objects that he personally created or possessed. Could this be a notebook personally written by Paimon? At this moment, a voice rang out in Wang Chong's ear as one of the rebel leaders spoke. Impossible. Paimon was one of the 10 demon gods, one of the most powerful of the 72 demon god pillars. He was sealed in the first wave of the invasion and is now floating in the depths of the ocean. How could he have survived until the era of the Elam dynasty? Another leader of the rebel army said. No matter what, these ruins must be inextricably linked to Paimon. It's truly inconceivable. Although the legends say that the 72 demon god pillars are all as cunning as foxes and know all kinds of languages, I've never heard of their handwriting. Could the demon gods also be able to write the human language? The rebel leaders sighed in amazement. These underground ruins of the ancient civilization of the Elam dynasty were like a massive riddle that attracted the attention of all the Khorasani and rebel leaders. Even Bahram was in a daze as he stared at the damaged book on the altar, a pensive look on his face. Do any of you here understand the language of ancient times? Bahram suddenly asked. Although there are scholars who have studied ancient civilizations, it's already quite impressive that they can recognize a language from 800 years ago. The Elam civilization is at least 3,000 to 5,000 years old, perhaps even longer. It's simply impossible for anyone to recognize the language on this book, a rebel leader with a curly beard said. A rebel leader with a curly beard said. All of them looked regretfully at the book on the altar. The language in this book was left behind from the closest era of the demon god era. This book was likely to contain the marks and secrets of that glorious demon god era that everyone admired and yearned for. But none of the rebel leaders had been able to uncover this secret. This was truly a pity. Moreover, books were fragile. Although this precious book was placed before them, none of them dared to carelessly touch it, much less open it and carefully examine it. Great General, can I have a try? At this moment, a voice broke the silence. Wang Chong had ascended the platform and was walking over. Wang Chong. Gao Xinji was flabbergasted by these words. He had noticed Wang Chong the moment he entered, but not even Gao Xinji had expected Wang Chong to suddenly make this request. Although the outer cover of the book on the altar was made of bronze, the pages on the inside would shatter at the slightest touch. It had been one of the rebel leaders who had flipped through it that had caused the pages to become damaged. Moreover, whether it was the 72 demon god pillars or the Elam dynasty, they were both internal affairs of the Sassanid dynasty and the rebel armies. It was truly inappropriate for Wang Chong to get involved at a time like this. Wang Chong said nothing, only turned his head and glanced at Gao Xinji, giving him a reassuring look. Great General, is this possible? Wang Chong asked. This? Bahram hesitated for a moment, then turned his head to glance at the surrounding rebel leaders and quickly nodded. Yes. If anyone else dared to make such a request in front of them, Bahram or any of the other rebel leaders would assuredly be enraged. This sort of request was far too abrupt, even offensive. But Wang Chong was different. In the coalition army, Wang Chong's prestige was like the noon sun, and as the commander of the coalition army, his prestige even surpassed that of Bahram. At a time like this, probably only Wang Chong's request would not be considered excessive. Many thanks. Wang Chong quickly walked over and stood on the altar, which was half the height of a man. Without much hesitation, Wang Chong extended a palm and pressed it against the damaged book on the altar. Stone of Destiny, help me obtain the secret in this book. In a domain that no one else could reach, Wang Chong communicated with the Stone of Destiny in his mind. From the moment he set foot in this place and saw this book, the riddle of destiny in Wang Chong's mind had begun to madly pulse and flash. More importantly, while everyone else was focused on the symbol of the 72 demon god pillars on the bronze cover of the Elam book, only Wang Chong noticed the unremarkable symbol of a black eye. It was exactly the same as the one he had seen on the wall outside. Translating the Book of Paimon requires 10,000 points of destiny energy. Is user certain? The emotionless voice of the Stone of Destiny resounded in his mind. Chapter 12:15. I'm sure. Wang Chong immediately said. A moment later, a hazy light erupted from Wang Chong's hand and engulfed the entire book. Beginning translation of ancient characters. Prepare to receive information. Does user wish to spend 100 points of destiny energy to receive the information? The Stone of Destiny asked. Wang Chong nodded. A moment later, the book began to flip through the pages in a gentle light, showing no signs of breaking. The Book of Paimon. For the first time, this ancient book of the Elam dynasty opened its doors to Wang Chong, leading Wang Chong into this vanished ancient civilization. Page after page, more information appeared in Wang Chong's mind as he flipped through the book. After some time, when the last page was turned, the entire Book of Paimon had been translated. Wang Chong opened his eyes and immediately saw Bahram and the other rebel leaders, all of them staring at him in shock. Wang Chong Thu, Bahram looked in shock at Wang Chong, hesitating to speak. It was simply impossible for anyone to decipher the book on the altar, so when Wang Chong had gone over, Bahram had not even considered whether Wang Chong could decipher the secrets of the book, because Wang Chong was simply not a Khorasani. But from the situation just now, it appeared that Wang Chong had managed to decipher the words. Wang Chong nodded, and as he looked at the expectant Bahram and the other rebel leaders, he did not hide anything. This book was written by an Elam state teacher called Muawiyah. It records the entire history of the Elam dynasty from its rise to its fall. But because the book is incomplete, I can only guess at a portion of the truth from the contents of the book. Wang Chong's words immediately attracted everyone's attention. The surrounding rebel leaders, including Bahram, all began to pant, their usual composure gone. The Elam dynasty. This was an ancient civilization even more powerful than the Sassanid Empire. They had created many astonishing miracles and enormous projects that excelled the workmanship of nature. What was most praised about the Elamites was that they had broken through the limitations of the earth. Every single one of them could fly in the air like a bird. In addition, they had also created many martial arts and magic tools. However, all of these resplendent reputations had disappeared overnight. As the descendants of Sassanid and ancient Elam, there was no one in the hall who didn't care. As the state preceptor of the Elam dynasty, Muawiyah was deeply trusted by the Elam dynasty's king, and he single-handedly brought about the prosperity of the entire Elam dynasty. He supported 6 kings of Elam, and personally witnessed 4 of them die of old age. Before Wang Chong could finish his sentence, cries of alarm rang out from the underground palace. Although Wang Chong only repeated the meaning, everyone understood the hidden meaning behind Wang Chong's words. How is that possible? If what he said is true, doesn't that mean that he has lived in the Elam dynasty for over 200 years? How could anyone live that long? And according to what he said, the Elam dynasty was only able to reach such a powerful state because of him. But how is that possible? Why has such a powerful figure never left a mark on history? We've never even heard of Muawiyah's name. A leader of the Revolutionary Army exclaimed in shock. If what Wang Chong said was true, this was bound to shake all the countries west of the Tsong Mountains. Wang Chong swept his gaze across the crowd and did not refute them. Instead, he continued, according to Muawiyah's notes, there has always been a faction controlling the Elam dynasty, and they have tried time and time again to destroy this country. They consider themselves gods, enjoying the worship of everyone, and enslaving all humans. Muawiyah spent his entire life thinking of ways to resist these gods, but in the end he still failed. And the entire Elam dynasty became the funerary object of this defeat. In the underground cavern, everyone was stunned by this news. The powerful Elam civilization had actually been destroyed by gods? How was that possible? Impossible. Impossible. The Elam dynasty was destroyed by the fiendish demons. Everyone knows this. The murals also show it clearly. This Muawiyah's notebook can't be real. A general of the Revolutionary Army said. The contents of this book completely overturned everything they knew. There must be something missing. These ruins can't lie, nor can the ruins of the Elam dynasty. There must be something we don't know about. Lord Protector General, look again. This Muawiyah definitely has another name. Such an important person can't be unknown. Muawiyah must be just an alias, a rebel leader said. One of the leaders of the rebel army said. The general is right. Muawiyah is only his alias. He has another name, Paimon. This book is also called the Book of Paimon. Wang Chong stared at the rebel leader and enunciated each word clearly. Wang Chong's final words sent the hall into an uproar. Everyone stared at Wang Chong, so shocked that they couldn't speak. Even Bahram had a look of extreme shock on his face. Paimon? It can't be Paimon. Isn't he one of the 72 demon god pillars? How could he be a human, and the state teacher of the Elam dynasty? Everyone was stunned. I don't know what's going on, but there's no doubt that this Muawiyah is Paimon. He even mentioned that he was punished by God, causing his body to deform. In order to prevent this secret from being forgotten, he specially built this underground palace to pass on the secret. Wang Chong sternly said. In the main hall, everyone was immersed in the impact, unable to speak for a long time. Paimon, one of the 72 demon god pillars, was actually the creator of the Elam dynasty's golden age. Demon gods protected humans, sky gods slaughtered humans. Thus, all of this caused everyone's minds to be in chaos, enough for them to ponder for a very, very long time. General Wang, did the Book of Paimon mention anything else? Why did the gods do this? What goal did they want to achieve? Bahram suddenly walked over and asked. There's nothing else. The Book of Paimon is incomplete, and much of its information has been lost. Moreover, based on the information I've obtained, this is the first half of the Book of Paimon, and I don't know where the second half is. Wang Chong said. What? Bahram's eyes widened in surprise at this news. This underground ruin had been preserved in an extremely complete manner. If this Muawiyah really was Paimon, he had every chance of writing everything down. If he had divided the handwriting into two parts, it could only mean that this matter was far too important to him. If he had gathered all of it together, the chances of it being lost were far too high, so he had intentionally divided it into two parts. But I found it. Right at this moment, a loud shout suddenly rang out, attracting everyone's attention. Paimon's ritual tool. It really is Paimon's ritual tool. The words ritual tool caused all the rebel leaders to rush over. The authenticity of the Book of Paimon was secondary. Their goal in entering this underground cave had been to find the relics of the 72 demon god pillars. In the history of Khorasan and Arabia, anything related to the 72 demon god pillars had been extremely powerful. At this moment, only Wang Chong did not rush over. Looking away from the Book of Paimon, Wang Chong quickly walked down. Wang Chong had no interest in Paimon's ritual tool. At his level of cultivation, one's strength was no longer determined by a simple ritual tool or weapon, but by one's comprehension of the laws of the world and their level of cultivation. What truly interested Wang Chong was the description of the gods in the Book of Paimon. That symbol is actually the god of the Book of Paimon. Just what kind of relationship do they have with the otherworldly invaders? A pensive look appeared in Wang Chong's eyes as he slowly walked out, his mind in turmoil. Everyone knew that the entire world had been destroyed by the otherworldly invaders, but the appearance of these otherworldly invaders was still shrouded in many mysteries. In his investigations, he was almost certain of one thing. The mark of the eye in the Book of Paimon had also appeared in the places where the otherworldly invaders had appeared. It had only appeared twice, and after that, there had been no other marks. It was as if they had appeared out of thin air and then vanished, but this only made them even more suspicious. If he could find the secret of these black eyes, he might be able to find the true source of the otherworldly invaders, including where they had come from and why they had done what they had done. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly came back to his senses. Using his arm to push off the wall, he quickly jumped out of the pit. The discovery of the Elam ruins and Paimon's ritual tool had sent shockwaves through Khorasan and the rebel army. At night, as Wang Chong was resting in his room, an unexpected figure knocked on Wang Chong's door. Baram? Wang Chong was flabbergasted to see this figure walk in. General, are you very interested in our Khorasan and those ancient ruins? Baram sat down across from Wang Chong and got straight to the point. Wang Chong was flabbergasted, but then he remembered something and smiled. Great General is talking about what happened in the pit during the day? Because I noticed that General was not interested in Paymon's ritual tool. On the contrary, you were very interested in the Elam dynasty's civilization and the various ancient secrets. Baram said. As Wang Chong was examining the weapons around him, Baram was also examining him. No matter what, Wang Chong had displayed an interest that was completely different from others. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Instead, he took up a brush and drew a symbol that was extremely similar to the black eye on the Book of Paimon. What is this? Baram stared in surprise at the strange symbol that Wang Chong had drawn. It's also something from an ancient ruin, but it's not in Khorasan. Wang Chong grinned and then explained how he had discovered the symbol of the eye. But Wang Chong did not mention the apocalypse, instead saying that he had discovered this symbol in an ancient ruin in the Central Plains. In addition, Wang Chong explained what he had discovered in the Book of Paimon. So what you're saying is that those gods who destroyed the Elam dynasty, no matter what they are, they did something similar in the Central Plains? Baram said, his eyes filled with astonishment. Wang Chong gave a serious nod. But this isn't impossible. The Tang dynasty and Arabia were separated by tens of thousands of li, but didn't they still get in touch and fight at Talas? The Tang dynasty and the Sassanid dynasty both had powerful civilizations long ago, and it isn't impossible for a faction to appear in both the Elam dynasty and the Central Plains at the same time. To Baram's surprise, after a few moments of thought, he nodded. General, I do not know what you wish to find in these ruins, but when you mentioned that Paimon disguised himself as Muawiyah as the state teacher of the Elam dynasty, you reminded me of something. I remember that there was a high priest in Hyderabad in Sindh. When the Sassanid dynasty was at its peak, I heard of him as a child. Chapter 12:16. He has existed for an extremely long time, almost a living myth. I once heard that he knows many ancient secrets and truths, including the Elam dynasty. If you are interested in the Book of Paimon and the symbols on it, perhaps you can ask him about them. Baram fell silent for a few moments, and then his words caused Wang Chong's eyes to brighten. Baram paused for a moment, and then continued. But just like all the other people who hold secrets and have lived for an extremely long time, that Sin the High Priest is elusive. Many people have heard of him, but very few have actually seen him. Not even the Sindhis of Hyderabad know his exact location. They only hear his voice but never see him. Moreover, even the emperor of our Sassanid dynasty was unable to meet him. In Khorasan and the surrounding regions, that person is like a god. Out of respect for him, no one has ever tried to encroach on Sindhu. If you want to find something, perhaps you can go there and take a look. Baram's words were like a pebble that set off massive waves in Wang Chong's mind. The war was over and Arabia had lost so many people. No matter how muddle-headed and impulsive Mutasim III was, he would never start another war. In this period of peace, he really might be able to go to Sindhu. Moreover, Sindh had a large amount of Hyderabad ore. Now that Arabia had been defeated, perhaps he should go to Sindhu and discuss the matter of Arabia's quota. The rules drafted by Wang Chong were quickly passed through the coalition army. According to the rules, anyone who disrespected the Tang dynasty was disrespecting the coalition army. Baram and the other rebel leaders were even more enthusiastic about this rule than the Tang dynasty. The fact that the Tang dynasty was willing to establish this rule meant that they were willing to take root here. And this was precisely what Baram and the other rebel leaders hoped to see. At the same time, with Feng Changqing presiding over the army, his superb ability in logistics and government affairs immediately began to show itself. Through this series of measures, Feng Changqing had rapidly made the people of Khorasan have a favorable impression of the Tang dynasty. And as long as they could subdue the people of Khorasan, the Tang dynasty would be able to win the loyalty of other people to the Tang dynasty. Some days later, with the arrival of the first batch of Scions in Khorasan, The Tang dynasty had placed its first nail in Khorasan and everything was on the right track. At this time, after leaving everything to Gao Xianji, his father, and Su Hanshan, Wang Chong led Li Sai, Cui Piaoqi, the King Gongke, Zhang Shouji, and the 1,000 Wushang cavalry out of Khorasan, traveling northwest toward Sind. After 7 or 8 days of travel, they finally entered a new area. This is Sind? How barren! Atop a large horse, Xue Qianjun stared in amazement at the scene before him. He knew that Sind was very poor and that Sind was completely different from other empires, but only when he truly set foot on this land did he realize just how different Sind was. What appeared before him was a black world. The distant mountains were tall and straight, covered in jagged rocks that were as sharp as swords. Moreover, they were completely bare, with no vegetation to be seen. As he approached, he could see that the ground was muddy, black rotting mud that exuded a pungent stench. Upon entering this area, all the Wushang cavalry, including Li Sai and the King Gongke, couldn't help but cover their mouths and noses. This was a forgotten world, a fallen world. At a glance, it was like they had gone from the world of humans to the world of the god of death. Blackened skeletons could be seen in the muddy mud. Flies flew through the air and maggots burrowed through the mud. It was an unbearable sight. I really don't dare to believe that the true Sind would be like this. Li Sai couldn't help but say. There's a saying that goes, you will know what hell is when you see Sind. Only when you see its most wretched state will you treasure everything you have and rejoice that you were born in the Central Plains, in the Tang dynasty. At this moment, Zhang Shouji also looked ahead and urged his horse forward. He paused for a moment and glanced at the horrifying corpses in the mud, reminding them, don't worry, I won't be able to kill you. In addition, Sind is plagued by all kinds of diseases and malaria, and there is a lot of miasma here. This has something to do with how few people invade this place. Everyone, don't get careless. Take the pills you prepared earlier. Gulp. Hearing Zhang Shouji's words, everyone reacted one after another. They took out a few brown pills from the medicine pouches they carried with them and swallowed them with water. After making ample preparations, they set off once more, heading deeper into Sind. More and more skeletons appeared on the road, and corpse poison and miasma began to spread in small areas. On the side of the road, quite a few blackened, starving, and emaciated Sindhi were kneeling on the ground, begging for mercy when they saw them. What's going on here? I remember that we gave the Sindhi a large amount of food, and the Sindhi obtained several million taels of gold from the Hyderabad ore. This amount should be enough for them to buy a large amount of food, so why are so many people starving to death? Wang Chong said with a frown. He had given Sind the 2 massive orders, and the prices had far exceeded the norm, but it seemed like the Sindh's situation had no effect at all. My lord, our guide in Sind says that the current situation is actually the best Sind has seen in several decades. The number of people starving to death is probably less than 5% of what it was in the past. All of Sindhu is now endlessly grateful to that young marquis of the Tang dynasty. He was willing to be our guide this time entirely because we are Tang people. He wants to ask if we have met that young marquis, and if there is a chance, can we introduce him to him? He wants to personally thank him. Yuan Shusong rode forward and conversed with the short Arab guide before returning to Wang Chong's side and relaying his story without leaving out a single word. Bang! Everyone began to laugh at Wan Shuyang's words, and even Wang Chong couldn't help but smile. This Sindhi guide had been found by Bahram on the outskirts of Khorasan. When he had found him, he had only said that he needed his help with the Tang people, and the information that had been passed down from Khorasan about Wang Chong was that he was the young commander of the Tang dynasty. Very few people knew that Wang Chong had another title, the young marquis, and this Sindhi guide clearly did not know. Tell him that he has already thanked us. Wang Chong smiled. On the other side, the dark-skinned Sindhi was bewildered by Yuan Shusong's words and the laughter of the crowd. He simply couldn't understand what he had said wrong. In the end, it was Wan Shuyang who whispered a few words into his ear, upon which the Sindhi became so excited that he couldn't help but shout in excitement. Now that he knew Wang Chong's identity, the Sindhi guide immediately became much more diligent. Wherever he went, he would excitedly run over and shout at other Sindhi, quickly attracting many Sindhi to kneel on the side of the road and kowtow. Wang Chong also found this somewhat unbearable and ordered his subordinates to distribute some food. After 3 days of traveling across more than half of Sindhu, Wang Chong's group finally arrived at the most famous mountain range in all of Sindhu, the Hyderabad mountain range. This is where the Wuzi steel weapons are made? Good. How steep! The sight of the undulating Hyderabad mountain range made them feel that it was not just tall and majestic, but abnormally steep. This pitch-black and sturdy mountain range was covered in jagged rocks as sharp as swords. It felt as if the slightest carelessness would cause one to fall into a bottomless abyss, their bones crushed and their heart pierced by 10,000 swords. I really can't believe that the Sindhi are mining in such a mountain range. It's difficult to even walk here, much less ride a horse. Li Sai couldn't help but mutter to himself as he gazed at the massive mountain range before him. His eyes were also filled with shock. The first time he saw Hyderabad, it truly lived up to its reputation. Even the Wushang cavalry couldn't help but feel a sense of awe when they saw this mountain range. It gave off a feeling that it would be difficult to cross. Wang Chong said nothing. Seeing all of this from the rear, he had the same thought. But for some reason, the Hyderabad mountain range gave him a unique feeling. But before he could think about it, he heard a loud shout. They're here. It's Ablanadin and Arloja. Taken aback, Wang Chong raised his head and saw two familiar figures leading a group of black-robed Sindhi monks on the jagged rocks. They were swiftly making their way down the Hyderabad mountain. Taking a closer look, the two leading the group were Ablanadin and Arloja, who had a close relationship with Wang Chong. The terrain of the mountain was extremely complicated, and sharp rocks were everywhere. But Ablanadin and Arloja led the group of monks on the sharp rocks and swiftly made their way down the mountain. Seeing Wang Chong and Li Sai's group from afar, Ablanadin and Arloja shouted in excitement and hastened their pace. "Ah, masters, long time no see." Wang Chong urged his horse forward to meet the pair. Wang Chong and Arloja had been old friends for a very long time. After more than a year, Ablanadin and Arloja had grown thinner, but they seemed more spirited. On their chests, Wang Chong could see two small mountain emblems. It was apparent that they had been promoted. "Marquis, you're finally here. We've been waiting for you for a long time. When we heard that you were fighting with the Arabs at Talas, we were extremely worried. But Ablanadin and I both believed that Marquis was blessed by the heavens and would definitely win," Arloja said. Chapter 12:17. Speaking of which, I must thank the two masters for delivering the Hyderabad ores in time, Wang Chong chuckled. After exchanging pleasantries, the trio swiftly ascended the Hyderabad mountain range. The terrain of the mountain was rugged, so Wang Chong left the majority of the Wushang cavalry at the foot of the mountain. Then he led Li Sai and the other experts to the summit of the Hyderabad mountain range. At the top of the mountain, thick smoke could be seen. Crude houses could be seen everywhere, and tens of thousands of Sindhis were working hard on the mountain. They held all kinds of crude tools and were hammering away at the rocks on the surface of the mountain, bit by bit. Even further away, Wang Chong saw several massive machines. Like behemoths, they were drilling and excavating at the center of the Hyderabad mountain range. This was the first time Wang Chong had come to the Hyderabad mountain range, and he had personally witnessed the excavation process of the world's most precious ores. Everything was shocking. However, when he saw the crude tools used by the miners, Wang Chong indiscernibly frowned, but he didn't say anything. "Marquis, it is rare for you to grace us with your presence. Is there anything that Ablanadin and I can help you with? As long as it is within our means, Marquis, feel free to instruct us." Arloja was dressed in a black monk's robe, and he said respectfully, "Is the high priest here? I wish to discuss the matter regarding the Hyderabad ores with the high priest. There are also some other matters that I wish to consult the high priest on." Wang Chong said. Ablanadin and Arloja glanced at each other and smiled, as though expecting Wang Chong to ask such a question. "Marquis, please follow me. The high priest is already waiting for you." Following behind Ablanadin and Arloja, Wang Chong, Li Sai, and the rest quickly headed into the depths of the Hyderabad mine. In the depths of the Hyderabad mountains, Wang Chong finally met the legendary Sindhu high priest. It was an old, simple temple made of iron and steel. The temple was located at the bottom of a collapsed mine in the middle of the mountain range. It looked very simple. There were no decorations on the iron pillars of the temple. Only the rust told the story of the wind and rain the temple had experienced. "High priest, I've brought him here." Within the temple, Ablanadin and Arloja stood side by side, bowing respectfully towards a figure above the temple. Wang Chong looked up and saw a black-robed monk sitting on a square chair above the temple like a statue. His eyes were closed and he sat there motionlessly. Even at such a close distance, Wang Chong couldn't sense any signs of life from him. It was as if he was a lifeless husk sitting there. Given Wang Chong's current level of cultivation, this was simply unbelievable. The high priest has already cultivated the secret ascetic art to the highest level. If the high priest is willing, he can even go 3 or 4 years without eating or drinking. As if knowing what Wang Chong was thinking, Ablanadin and Arloja spoke up. "What?" Before Wang Chong could say anything, Li Sai, the king of Ganka, and the others around him all revealed looks of extreme shock. A person who doesn't eat or drink for 3 to 5 days will be in mortal danger. A martial artist who can last 10 days is already an incredible feat. How could someone go 3 or 4 years without eating or moving? Not even an imperial great general can do this. This is unbelievable. How could a human go so long without eating or drinking? Life had its limits. Just like how humans found it very difficult to escape the pull of the earth, living beings could not go without eating or drinking. 3 or 4 years had far surpassed their imaginations. There's no need to make such a fuss. There are countless secret arts in the world, and Sindhu's ascetic art is completely different from the stellar energy we cultivate. It is a tempering of the will and the body, and during ascetic practice, it can weaken the body's functions to the minimum. Some of the most formidable ascetic masters can be buried alive for 3 or 4 years and then dig them out. All of this is real. Wang Chong suddenly spoke. He had a far greater understanding of Sindhu's secret arts than anyone else. Although the high priest's abilities were astonishing, it was not impossible. I didn't think that the young Marquis would have such an understanding of us Sindhi. At this moment, a voice rang out in his ear. Wang Chong had never heard such a voice before. It was so complex that it was impossible to tell if it was a man or a woman, old or young. For a moment, one would even wonder if they had really heard this voice, or if they had just spoken. "High priest." Unexpectedly, Ablanadin and Arloja, who were at the side, suddenly moved. They bowed down together and remained motionless. In the main hall, everyone's heart skipped a beat and they all looked up at the high priest at the top. The high priestess, who had been sitting there motionlessly like a clay statue, suddenly began to tremble. Under the gazes of countless people, large chunks of dirt fell from the high priestess's face and fell to the ground. At almost the same time, Wang Chong sensed that the statue-like high priest had sprouted like bamboo after the rain, suddenly come to life. An enormous life energy erupted from his body like a hurricane. In the blink of an eye, the high priest's eyelids trembled and flew open. "Lord Priest, we finally meet." Wang Chong faintly smiled and gave a curtsy. This was not the first time Wang Chong had interacted with the Sindhi high priest. All transactions related to the Hyderabad or required the high priest's approval. But this was the first time they had truly met. "Huh, young Marquis, you've come for the Hyderabad or, right?" The high priest chuckled as he slowly stood up from his seat. Everyone in the hall was stunned. Only Wang Chong remained indifferent, as if he had expected all this. The Arabs have already been defeated. More than 1 million soldiers have been killed, and they won't be able to mount a counterattack for a very long time. All the important routes to the east and west are under my control. If you could have said that you were threatened by the Arabs in the past, then now, Lord Priest, there is no need to worry, yes? Wang Chong faintly smiled. The Hyderabad ore was of utmost importance. With each additional Wuzi steel sword, the strength of the Tang dynasty would increase. In this aspect, Wang Chong would haggle over the smallest details and not yield. Wang Chong had come this time to discuss the Arab quota. The high priest smiled faintly, but a shrewd look flashed in his eyes. Young Marquis should know that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. If all the Hyderabad ore is sold to the Tang dynasty, it might not necessarily be a good thing for Sindh. Li Sai, the king of Gangka, and the others paled at these words. The members of the Tang dynasty at Wang Chong's side were especially taken aback. The Tang dynasty and Sindh had an excellent partnership. Even when Talas was besieged by the Arabs, the Sindhi had sent the weapons that the Tang dynasty needed as quickly as possible to Chishi, making an enormous contribution to the Tang dynasty's subsequent victories. But no one had expected that the Sindhi would be so unwilling to cooperate now that the war was over. Lord Priest. At this moment, even Ablanadin and Arloja couldn't help but raise their heads in shock. It was clear that not even they had expected this answer. Wang Chong's expression was indifferent as he waved his hand, indicating that Ablanadin and Arloja should calm down. The high priest's words are reasonable. We truly can't put all our eggs in one basket, but if I buy all the eggs, will the high priest still have anything to worry about? Wang Chong said. The young Marquis's words are reasonable, but the high priest's brow creased as he fell into deep thought. 1,500 taels. Wang Chong faintly smiled as he suddenly announced a number. Marquis. Ablanadin and Arloja were at first dazed by Wang Chong's words, but they quickly reacted, expressions of extreme shock on their faces. The number Wang Chong had announced was clearly the price of Hyderabad ore. Before the war, Wang Chong had already offered an astronomical price of 1,000 taels of gold. After the victory, no one had expected Wang Chong to be so direct. The price of a June of Hyderabad ore had risen by half, rising to 1,500 taels. When it came to Sindh, Wang Chong's generosity were enough to make any wealthy merchant pale in comparison, leaving them in the dust. On the other hand, the king of Gangka, Li Sai, and the others remained unmoved, their expressions unchanged. Although they also felt that 1,500 taels was a little too much and could be bought at an even lower price, none of them doubted Wang Chong's decision. No matter how absurd Wang Chong's decision seemed, in the end, Wang Chong would prove that he was correct. The results of the past had proven this point countless times. Wang Chong's expression was calm and composed as he stared at the high priest. To Wang Chong and the Tang dynasty, money was the least important thing. The reparations from the Arabs amounted to 1 billion taels of gold, enough for Wang Chong to do anything he wanted. Moreover, when danger approached, gold and silver would become worthless. What was truly important were strategic resources. For example, the Hyderabad ore that could alter the course of this calamity. No amount of wealth could compare to this. The high priest's brow creased. He seemed very surprised by Wang Chong's generosity, but that was all. The high priest remained unmoved. 1,600 taels. Wang Chong continued. The high priest remained unmoved. 1,700 taels. Wang Chong continued to raise the price. However, the high priestess did not seem to hear anything and remained unmoved. In a flash, Wang Chong seemed to understand something. Faintly smiling, he extended 2 fingers. 200 dan of grain. Chapter 12:18. 500 dan. In addition, I also need your hybrid rice from Jiaoji. The 500 dan of grain was secondary, but the high priest's final words caused Wang Chong to reveal a look of shock. Hybrid rice was Wang Chong's secret project in Jiaoji, and it was also the most important part of Wang Chong's overall plan. Wang Chong had kept this information under tight wraps, and not even some of the important officials of the court knew of it. Wang Chong had never imagined that the Sindhi high priest would know of the existence of hybrid rice. Impossible! Without much thought, Wang Chong immediately rejected the Sindhi high priest's request. Other than the Tang dynasty, hybrid rice will never be allowed to enter any other country. Whether one was selfish or heartless, to Wang Chong, hybrid rice was an untouchable benefit. Before the Tang dynasty could enjoy this benefit, no other country could enjoy it first. Not only that, Sindh was adjacent to Arabia. Once the hybrid rice entered Sindh, it would be entering Arabia. The Arabian Empire could even enslave all the Sindhi and have them grow hybrid rice. The moment they discovered this potential profit, the Arabs would do so without hesitation. Wang Chong could not tolerate this sort of act of aiding the enemy. Buzz! Wang Chong's words immediately plunged the hall into a deathly silence. Blonidin and Arloja also had awkward expressions. Wang Chong was truly extremely kind to Sindh. At the very least, Sindh had never received such treatment from the Arabs. The price of a June of Hyderabad ore had risen from 300 taels to 1,700 taels. This was all because of Wang Chong. Anyone else would have never done such a thing. In their hearts, Wang Chong was a true friend, but the high priest's actions made it seem like he was using this opportunity to blackmail him, which was rather shameful. It's fine if you don't agree. To their surprise, the high priest faintly smiled, not bothering about this matter. However, I hope that the young Marquis can provide us with an additional 5 million dan of grain. In the last sentence, the high priestess revealed her true motive. From the beginning to the end, the high priest had never thought of getting the hybrid rice from Wang Chong. Such an important thing involved the entire Tang dynasty. It was impossible to give it to an outsider so easily. From the beginning to the end, the high priest only had one goal, and that was food. Sure. Wang Chong said straightforwardly without the slightest hesitation. From the very start, Wang Chong knew that the high priest's ambition did not lie in this. Instead, it lay in the food that could nourish all of Sindh. From the moment he had crossed from Khorasan to the moment he entered the mines of Hyderabad in Sindh, Wang Chong had seen far too many starving corpses. The poverty, backwardness, and famine of Sindh were far worse than what Wang Chong knew. Compared to the rations that Sindh needed, gold and silver seemed insignificant. However, I can't give you the hybrid rice. However, if the high priest only wishes to help the Sindhis survive, perhaps I can help by bringing a certain number of Sindhis into the territory of the Tang dynasty. Although it's not enough to make us rich and powerful, we definitely won't starve to death. Wang Chong said after a moment of silence. At that moment, the high priest was finally moved. Young Marquis, thank you. The Tang dynasty was famous for its affluence. No one knew better than the high priest that if he could get the help of Wang Chong and the Tang dynasty, it would be something that no amount of gold or silver could replace. Just this alone would save countless lives in Sindh every year. I thank you on behalf of all the Sindhis. Blonidin, Arloja, I'll leave the matter of the ore to you. Starting from now, we will sever our ore business with Karax Spazinu, Abbasid Caliphate, and all the other countries. All the ore will be supplied to the Tang dynasty. In addition, each June of Hyderabad ore won't cost 1,700 taels of gold. Let's do as Marquis said, 1,500 taels of gold per June, Buzz. Hearing the high priest's words, the crowd behind Wang Chong grew excited. Their goal in this trip had been the Hyderabad ore. Now that the Sindh high priest had cut off all supplies and focused on mining for the Tang dynasty, this was much better than they had expected. Many thanks, High Priest. A smile appeared on Wang Chong's face. After a pause, Wang Chong suddenly took out a folded piece of paper. In addition, Wang Chong has another matter that he would like to consult the High Priest on. The matter of the Hyderabad ore had been resolved, and with the high priest's words, the matter was set in stone. But to Wang Chong, there was another matter that was even more important than the Hyderabad ore. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong unfurled the folded paper and revealed its contents. Buzz! Upon seeing that mysterious black eye on the paper, the composed Sindh high priest suddenly trembled and took several steps back, his face paling. How do you know of this thing? The high priest's eyes were brimming with shock. So the high priest also recognizes this. Wang Chong suddenly stepped forward, his expression turning grave. Baram was correct. The Sindh high priest truly did know many secrets. You still haven't told me where you learned of this mark. The high priest raised his head and gravely looked at Wang Chong, his face devoid of its previous composure and ease. Without hesitation, Wang Chong immediately explained the matter of the Elam dynasty and the Book of Paimon. So the high priest truly does know some of the Elam dynasty's secrets? Wang Chong asked. You overestimate me. The Sin the high priest bitterly smiled, but he quickly understood. Bahram is correct, but there is one thing. I am not the person who can answer your question. Wang Chong was dumbfounded. Young Marquis, have you not realized? I'm not a person who has lived for 200 years. The high priest bitterly smiled. Wang Chong's brows began to rise as he felt an indescribable sensation. At this moment, countless thoughts flew through his mind. He seemed to understand something, but he also seemed to understand nothing. The high priest that Bahram spoke of isn't me. There is only one true high priest. In Sindhu, although I am also called the high priest, everyone understands that I am only a substitute high priest. I can't answer your question. I can't even tell him about your request. The high priest said. Everyone in the hall glanced at each other, and Wang Chong's heart chilled. He finally understood why Bahram had felt that something was off when he mentioned the Sin the high priest. As it turned out, the Sin the high priest he knew and the one Bahram spoke of were completely different people. There was actually another high priest in Sindhu, and Wang Chong had never heard of him, whether in his last life or now. The clear situation suddenly became shrouded in fog. If not even the Sindhu high priest could contact that person, he was likely to return empty-handed. He had believed that he would be able to find some information about the calamity, but it now appeared that his hopes had all come to naught. Do none of you know his true location? Wang Chong unwillingly said. It's useless. We can't even contact Venerable Him. Only he can contact us. Each time, the substitute high priest is chosen by Venerable Him, and after that, there has been no news from him. The high priest's ascetic cultivation has probably surpassed all records and our imaginations. Unless Venerable Him wants to see you, there's nothing anyone can do, the high priest sternly said. The high priest grimaced at these words, and even Wang Chong raised his eyebrows. If even someone of the high priest's status was unable to find him, didn't that mean that there was no hope for him to find him? But although none of us know where Venerable Him is, there is one thing that we can be sure of. He practices ascetic cultivation in the Hyderabad mountains. However, although none of us know where the high priest is, there is one thing that we can be sure of. The place where he practices asceticism must be in the Hyderabad mountain range. If Marquis stays here long enough, he might be summoned by him. It's not impossible. Just as Wang Chong found it hard to conceal the shock in his eyes, the high priest suddenly spoke. Thank you, priestess. Wang Chong bowed slightly. The true Sin the high priest's movements were mysterious and unfathomable. Although Wang Chong was disappointed, he could only accept this. Just as the high priest had said, he could only try his luck. Arloja, Ablanadin, it's rare for the young Marquis to come to our Sindh. You are old friends with the young Marquis, so help me take good care of them. After chatting for a while in the hall, the high priest suddenly said to Arloja and Ablanov beside him. Arloja and Ablanadin bowed, knowing that the high priest was about to rest. No matter who the guest was, the high priest rarely received them for long. For him to receive Wang Chong for so long was already unprecedented. Then Wang Chong will take his leave. Wang Chong bowed, turned, and left with Arloja and Ablanadin. But as he turned, his gaze inadvertently passed over the high priest's right eye, and Wang Chong's heart thumped. His lips moved, but he said nothing and quickly walked out. Venerables, the high priest's right eye. Once they were out of the hall, Wang Chong finally couldn't help but ask. Marquis has already noticed. Both of them were slightly shaken. Arloja, who was by their side, even sighed softly and sighed with emotion. The high priest's right eye truly is blind. That eye is fake. The two sighed as they spoke of the past. Oh, how could it be like this? Wang Chong frowned. It's a long story, but it happened 10-some years ago. At the time, a group of people invaded the mine. They were masked and dressed in black, and their attacks were extremely vicious. The high priest did his best to resist, but in the end he was still blinded in one eye. For the Hyderabad or? Wang Chong said in surprise. I don't know. Chapter 12:19. That matter was very strange. These men in black had never appeared before, and when we investigated the matter, We discovered that the Hyderabad ore wasn't damaged at all. Moreover, although quite a few of those people died, when they retreated, they took away all the corpses, leaving not a single one behind. Even now, we still haven't been able to determine their origins. Wang Chang's brow creased, countless thoughts flitting through his mind. He vaguely thought of something, but he couldn't quite grasp it. After leaving the center of the mine, Ablanadin and Arloja brought Wang Chong to a simple house. It was made of black metal, had a muddy floor, and had a blackened bed. The air was suffused with a foul stench. "Marquis, the mine is simple and crude, and there isn't much to look at. I'll have to trouble you to stay here for a few nights," Ablanadin and Arloja apologetically said. The environment and conditions of Sindhu were harsh, and the majority of the monks in the mountains practiced ascetic practices. To them, a small house like this was probably an extravagant luxury. "It's fine. I'll clean it up myself." Once Ablanadin and Arloja had left, Wang Chong gestured behind him. Clang. There was a clattering of metal as several well-trained and well-coordinated guards knocked open the chests, took out steel plates, and inserted them into the mountain, where they quickly began to piece together. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. In just a short while, a simple and crude house prototype rapidly appeared on the peak of the Hyderabad mountain range. All kinds of parts and screws were quickly connected. In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, a clean and tidy steel room immediately appeared on the peak of the mountain. After laying a layer of steel on the ground, a quiet and tidy room appeared. Zhang Shouji had made ample preparations before setting off, and he had prepared these special house models for Wang Chong. Although he wouldn't be able to see the true Sindhi high priest, reaching an agreement with the Sindhu and obtaining all the rights to the Hyderabad ore was an enormous victory. Wang Chong handed Xue Qianjun and Zhang Shouji over to discuss this matter with Ablanadin and Arloja. In the evening, Zhang Shouji and Xue Qianjun finally returned from the depths of the mine. "How is it?" An oil lamp was lit in the room. Wang Chong sat in the room and asked. "I've already investigated during the day. The Sindhi's efficiency is truly too low. Based on their current situation, their output probably wouldn't change much in 5 to 10 years. If we continue with their current mining method, we might not be able to find what we want even after a very long time." Zhang Shouji sighed. The negotiation was only a part of it. For Zhang Shouji, what he was most concerned about was the equipment. The tools of the Sindhi are simply too primitive. They rely entirely on manpower to excavate. This must be changed. "I've already modified the mining tools based on the terrain and the conditions of the Sindhi. I've already drawn up the blueprints and will send them back to Khorasan tomorrow. As long as these tools can be manufactured, the Sindhi's mining efficiency will increase by at least 3 times. Wang Chong nodded. Nothing in the world was impossible to those who set their minds to it. As long as the method was appropriate, the output of Hyderabad ore would definitely increase. This was also the primary reason he had called Zhang Shouji over. How did the negotiations for the Hyderabad ore go? Based on Marquis' intentions, we offered 100 million taels of gold to buy out the mining rights to Hyderabad ore for the next 10 years. This enormous sum should be enough to resolve the Sindhi famine problem. Wang Chong nodded. With the mining rights to the Hyderabad mountains for 10 years, he could devote all his energy to excavating Hyderabad ore and make preparations for that calamity. As for the Sindhi, they would ultimately realize that they had made the correct decision. The profits they would obtain from this transaction would far surpass their expectations. Wang Chong asked many more questions. Once everything was over, Xue Qianjun and Zhang Shouji quickly left, and the Hyderabad mountains fell silent. In the end, the Sindhi miners also went to sleep. Time slowly passed, and for 3 or 4 days, Wang Chong searched the Hyderabad mountains. Wang Chong gradually came to understand the treasures of Sindhu, but the true Sindhi high priest remained elusive. Wang Chong had searched the entire mountain, but he had not found the slightest trace of the high priest. Am I really not fated to see him? Wang Chong stood on a large boulder, gazing at the winding beasts of the Hyderabad mountains. He was rather unwilling to give up. Although he knew that finding the Sindhi high priest would be extremely difficult, How could he be willing to just return home like this? At some point, night had fallen, and a black fog had begun to rise from the mountains. This was a phenomenon unique to the Hyderabad Mountains, and it seemed to be related to the ore at the base of the mountains. Wang Chong found it hard to dispel his vexation, so he decided to leap down the massive Hyderabad Mountains and head for the base of the mountains. The base of the mountains was quiet, and after some time, Wang Chong felt a strange sensation in his mind. Wang Chong's brow rose as he turned his head to look at the nearby ground. Gigi! That creature seemed to have no intention of concealing itself, excitedly shrieking as it dug its way out of the ground. A centipede monster suddenly appeared in front of Wang Chong, its two savage eyes bright as snow. Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile at the sight of this centipede monster. This was Mazel's pet, no, to be more precise, Wang Chong's pet. After Mazel's death, this centipede monster had been following Wang Chong. From Wang Chong's journey from Khorasan to the Hyderabad Mountains, this centipede monster had followed him underground. Little thing. Wang Chong smiled, his expression much gentler. Wang Chong suddenly leaped onto the head of the centipede monster. Let's go. Let's go for a stroll. An idea suddenly emerged in Wang Chong's mind, and a moment later, the centipede monster plunged into the ground and began to lead Wang Chong deeper underground. Perhaps because Wang Chong rarely sat on it, the centipede monster was clearly very excited. It squeaked and squeaked as it burrowed through the ground, moving quickly and fiercely. Although the surface of the Hyderabad Mountains was extremely tough, the ground beneath them was extremely soft. Perhaps I can use this chance to go underground and take a look. With a thought, Wang Chong suddenly changed directions and had the centipede monster dive into the depths of the Hyderabad Mountains. The underground region of this mountain range is very large. The centipede monster that Wang Chong had controlled had only dived for a few dozen meters before it immediately encountered a layer of hard underground rock. The surface of the Hyderabad Mountains was already very large, but the part beneath the surface was even larger. Wang Chong kept moving along the edge of the mountains. 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, until he was more than 800 meters underground, he still could not see the end of the underground region of the mountains. This made Wang Chong feel like he was diving deep into the sea and exploring the continental shelf. In addition, this depth was already very dangerous. The air here was very thin, and it was almost impossible to breathe. Only Wang Chong was affected, but it was not that serious. This was because Wang Chong had discovered that there was an ancient magic array on the body of the centipede monster, which could seal a part of the air inside. Although there wasn't much air in this area, Wang Chong's cultivation level was enough for him to last a very long time. 800 meters, 900 meters, he was getting farther and farther away from the surface. At this distance, even with the magic array on the centipede monster's body, he would not be able to last very long. Buzz. There was no light here, and his eyes could not see anything. Wang Chong spread out his psychic energy to cover the entire underground region. In a flash, Wang Chong had a complete understanding of the entire underground region. It seems like I really won't be able to find him. In the pitch-black darkness, Wang Chong could only sense the craggy rocks and thick earth. But the true Sin the High Priest was nowhere to be seen. Wang Chong was not randomly strolling around. He was searching for the Sindhu High Priest. In the next few days, Wang Chong had pretty much explored the entire Hyderabad Mountains of Sindhu, but he had found nothing. All that's left is the underground of the Hyderabad Mountains. But Wang Chong was still disappointed. After searching for so long, he had still come up empty-handed. It seemed like he would have to let the High Priest slip by. Buzz. Just when Wang Chong was prepared to leave, he suddenly sensed something strange. What's that? With a jolt, Wang Chong turned his head to look in another direction. More than 1,000 meters below the surface, Wang Chong suddenly sensed the ripples of a tide of energy. This energy was extremely far from Wang Chong, but from the ripples it produced, he could tell that it contained a terrifying amount of energy. Just the tiniest bit of it was already terrifying. What's going on here? With a thought, Wang Chong began to head in the direction of the ripples of energy. 1,100 meters, 1,200 meters. In just a few moments, Wang Chong sensed that the ripples of energy were increasing exponentially. And when Wang Chong was more than 1,500 meters below the surface, this energy so vast that it could cause the entire world to pale in shock suddenly appeared in his perception. Even an imperial great general seemed insignificant in the face of this enormous energy. All of this energy came from the depths of the earth, thousands of meters away. Chapter 12:20. What a powerful energy! To think that the Hyderabad Mountains would be hiding such a terrifying energy. This is simply inconceivable. Wang Chong was stunned by the ripples of energy coming from the ground. These spatial ripples made him think back to when Qutayba had cut open space with his sword. He sensed that this energy was connected to another mysterious space-time, and the energy he felt before him was probably only a tiny portion of the energy that leaked out from that world. At this moment, Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, many thoughts flitting through it. Wang Chong suddenly recalled some distant memories. When that calamity erupted, if he remembered correctly, the otherworldly invaders had crossed over from 3 different places. One of them, Wang Chong clearly remembered, was near Sindhu and not far from the Hyderabad Mountains. But it had been too long, and Wang Chong had never been to Sindhu before, so there were many things that he could not confirm, making it impossible for him to deduce. If that legend was true, could it be that the spatial door was not somewhere else, but in the Hyderabad Mountains? But why would this energy appear beneath the Hyderabad Mountains, and what connection did it have with the otherworldly invaders? Wang Chong stood motionless in a daze. After some time, Wang Chong suddenly had the centipede monster fly toward a place where the energy was concentrated. Wang Chong could sense that this energy was the closest to him. "Stop!" Without any warning, an elderly and deep voice resounded in Wang Chong's mind, imbued with extreme solemnity and warning. Wang Chong was greatly surprised by this voice. Who is it? This place was more than 1,500 meters below the surface, and the surroundings were pitch black and devoid of air. It was simply impossible for anyone to reach this place. "Hurry and stop. Young man, that's not a place you should touch." The voice continued, sounding extremely solemn. "Buzz." Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong sent out a vast wave of psychic energy that spread to every corner of his surroundings. But even with his supreme psychic energy abilities, Wang Chong had not discovered anything. This was simply unbelievable. "High Priest!" Wang Chong blurted out. No one could surpass Wang Chong in the field of psychic energy, and now, this person had projected himself into his mind without Wang Chong noticing. In all of Sindhu, Wang Chong could only think of one high priest. Other than him, there was no one else who could do this. When the words high priest left his mouth, there was a moment of silence in the underground world. But very quickly, the voice sounded again. "Young man, hurry and leave that place. That place is not for anyone to touch." After a few moments of thought, Wang Chong glanced in the direction of that tide of energy and immediately began to ascend. Although this person had never stated his identity, Wang Chong's previous silence was enough to tell the truth. "High Priest, this junior is the young Marquis of the Tang Dynasty, Wang Chong. I request an audience." Several dozen zhang from the bottom of the Hyderabad mountain range, Wang Chong suddenly stopped. Using his mind energy, a thought swept out in all directions like a wave, attempting to send the news out in this way. Although he had failed to find the high priest's true body, Wang Chong had not come up empty-handed. After analyzing the situation, Wang Chong had a rough idea of where the high priest was, but he still had not been able to pinpoint his exact location. Wang Chong stood motionless as he waited for the high priest's answer. His surroundings were quiet, and all was darkness. Everything was unknown in this underground region. Wang Chong quietly stood there, awaiting the high priest's answer. There were no ripples in the surroundings. The entire world seemed to have stopped. It seemed like only a moment, but also like countless moments. Finally, Wang Chong heard a long sigh. "Ha!" The voice from before spoke once more. This long sigh was suffused with boundless meaning. Wang Chong had never sensed such complex emotions from a person's sigh. At this moment, Wang Chong felt like he was looking at a person's entire life. Come. I know you've been looking for me. The voice disappeared immediately after it finished speaking. However, in just a moment, a faint candlelight suddenly appeared in Wang Chong's senses. The faint aura was not very strong, but it gave off a feeling that no matter how far away it was, this aura would not be weakened at all. Finally found it. Wang Chong was overjoyed. He immediately controlled the centipede monster and headed towards the faint aura. There's a crack in the rock to your right. Come in from there. Just a few zhang away from the bottom of the Hyderabad mountain range, the high priest's voice sounded again. Wang Chong looked carefully and indeed found a crack that was as wide as a person. Wang Chong took a deep breath and left the centipede monster's body. He quickly entered the crack in the rock. The crack looked narrow from the outside, but once he entered, it became much wider. It's a natural underground passageway. Wang Chong thought to himself. Like a leopard, he swiftly moved about in the cave. The walls of the cave were winding, but it was very wide. Wang Chong followed it and quickly climbed up. About 10 minutes later, Wang Chong had climbed 700 to 800 meters. Even Wang Chong was secretly surprised by the length and depth of the crack. Just as Wang Chong was wondering how deep the crack was, the high priest's voice suddenly sounded again. We're here. Come in. Wang Chong raised his head and finally saw a huge metal door in front of him. There was a luminous pearl embedded in the top of the metal door, emitting a faint light. Wang Chong was about to push the door open and enter when he suddenly saw a strange scratch on the metal door. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately stopped. These are the words. Using the dim light of the luminous pearl above the metal door, Wang Chong carefully examined it and discovered that the words were different from any of the modern languages. These words looked extremely ancient. Congratulations, host. You have discovered ancient Harappa words from over 3,000 years ago. Host is rewarded with 100 points of destiny energy. At this moment, the stone of destiny's voice suddenly rang out in Wang Chong's mind. Ancient Harappa? Hearing the voice in his mind, Wang Chong's body trembled, his heart filled with shock. He had never thought that this seemingly unremarkable iron door would be engraved with such ancient characters. Stone of Destiny. Attempt to use the riddle of destiny to translate the words on the metal door. Wang Chong's heart thumped, and he immediately spoke without hesitation. Request denied. Host's level is not high enough, and there is not enough information. Unable to translate. At almost the same time, the stone of destiny's voice rang out in his mind. Still not enough? Wang Chong sighed inwardly and could only give up. Bang. A moment later, Wang Chong pushed open the metal door and stepped inside. Wang Chong had imagined all sorts of scenarios in which he would meet with the Sin the High Priest, and he had also imagined what sort of scene lay behind this metal door. But he had never imagined that this would be a dead end. Behind the metal door was the same pitch-black and filthy cave wall, its surface uneven and craggy. Other than Wang Chong, there was nothing else in the room. There weren't even any furniture or chairs. It seemed like a trap. High Priest. Wang Chong probed. But all was quiet, and the High Priest's voice came to a sudden halt. Wang Chong called out several times and immediately sensed that something was wrong. When he had left the body of the centipede monster, he had taken in a full breath of air, but climbing up and opening his mouth several times had consumed most of the air in his lungs. Without enough air, not even an imperial great general like Wang Chong could survive 700 or 800 meters underground for long. Wang Chong's breathing slowly became ragged, and he felt like he was about to suffocate. Just when Wang Chong felt that something was wrong and was about to give up and turn to leave, a voice rang out in his ear. Endure a little longer. Wang Chong was still in a daze, not understanding what the Sin the High Priest was saying. In the next moment, the mountain rocks and powder above their heads rustled, and countless pieces of gravel and dust fell down. At this moment, the mountain began to tremble. A gust of air blew in from right above Wang Chong's head. Sensing this fresh air, Wang Chong immediately took in a deep breath, his mind reeling in shock. He was currently extremely deep into the ground. If not for the centipede monster, not even an imperial great general would have been able to get here. Yet the Sin the high priest had been able to instantly guide the air through the cracks in the mountain. This was a terrifying ability. Many thanks. No matter how slow Wang Chong was, he could tell that this was the high priest doing. If the high priest wanted him dead, there was no need to go through so much trouble. You shouldn't have come here. The cave was empty, but the high priest's voice rang out in Wang Chong's mind. Is the high priest referring to the energy underground or the matter I asked the substitute high priest about? Wang Chong calmly said, this place was covered in the tough rocks of Hyderabad. If the high priest was unwilling, he would find it very difficult to force him out. You shouldn't have come to either. The Sin the high priest sighed, his voice ancient. You've read the book of Paimon, so you should know that the more you know, the more dangerous it is for you. Wang Chong's face was calm, but his eyebrows rose. Just as he had guessed, nothing could escape the high priest's eyes, even though he was deep underground. There are some things that cannot be escaped. The sun will rise and the moon will set. This is inescapable. Rather than blindly running away, it was better to take the initiative to find out the truth. At the very least, he wouldn't panic when disaster approached. Chapter 12:22. If the price was your life, would you still say this? The Sin the high priest said. I've already cast aside life and death. Wang Chong indifferently said, his head slightly raised as he spoke, exuding a chilling aura. These words were a true reflection of Wang Chong's heart. If he cherished life, Wang Chong would not have used up all his wealth to lead several thousand warriors to battle with Nanzhao. If he cherished death, he would not have managed Qixi and struggled through the cracks. In the end, he had still led his army to participate in the Battle of Talas despite knowing how difficult it would be. To Wang Chong, the Black God Seal and the otherworldly invaders were more important than anything else. No matter what, he had to get to the bottom of all this. So, High Priest, can you tell me what this seal is? Why was the Elam civilization destroyed? What's the deal with the destructive energy deep underground? Wang Chong solemnly said. As he spoke, he took out the paper with the black eye, his eyes brimming with anticipation. The high priest's words revealed many secrets. Not only that, everything in this place was shrouded in mystery. Just the ancient Harappa characters on the metal door alone were not something an ordinary person could come into contact with. Wang Chong's intuition told him that if there was one person who could explain the truth behind all these secrets, it was this Sin the high priest who had lived for centuries in the depths of the Hyderabad mountains. Everything has a beginning and everything has an end. There are some things that you can only seek out on your own. The answer you will obtain from me may not be what you want. The Sin the high priest's voice drifted through the cave. All was quiet, and the feeling in Wang Chong's heart intensified. No matter who the high priest was, he definitely knew many, many things. Tell me, just who are they? Did they destroy the Elam dynasty? Why did they do this? Most importantly, are these people still alive? The last sentence was earth-shattering. The Elam dynasty's black eye god imprint was too similar to the one Wang Chong had seen in the post-apocalyptic era. Wang Chong had always guessed that if the Book of Paimon recorded them, then this was probably the only clue he had found regarding them. If he could find these people, he might be able to uncover the truth of the post-apocalyptic era. This was extremely important to Wang Chong. Buzz! As soon as Wang Chong's voice fell, the cave suddenly fell silent. The high priest's aura also disappeared in an instant, and the atmosphere became extremely mysterious. I didn't expect you to even know this. The high priest's first sentence shocked Wang Chong to the core. In an instant, his heart was in turmoil. Wang Chong's words had only been a guess, as the two marks separated by thousands of years were far too similar. But the Sin the high priest's words had made this guess a reality. You already know all the answers, so why bother asking? But Wang Chong calmly said, but his mind was truly shaken. I can't answer you. I can only tell you that everything has a reason. When you are looking for them, they are also looking for you. You also have something that they want. You can't get away from it. Soon, those people will also find you. The answers you want are all in your hands. You can only rely on yourself to find them. But you have to be careful. The Sin the high priest said. What? Wang Chang's expression flickered. He had never imagined that the high priest would say such a thing. I have something they want on me? High priest, just what are you talking about? Wang Chong sat up and stared at the high priest. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly felt that the situation had developed beyond his expectations. Wang Chong had come to the Hyderabad mountains in search of the otherworldly invaders and the secret of the Eye of God mentioned in the Book of Paimon, but the high priest had revealed a completely different answer to Wang Chong. Wang Chong had always believed that he was pursuing the Eye of God, but it now appeared that the Eye of God was also pursuing him. Had his pursuit of the secret of the Eye of God been exposed? So the Eye of God wanted to silence him. When the time comes, you will naturally understand. When you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Young man, if you want to retreat, there is still time. The high priest's voice seemed to have a deeper meaning. No matter what, I will not retreat. Wang Chong shook his head. Everything had its risks. Wang Chong understood that the high priest was warning him. If a faction that could destroy the Elam dynasty wanted to deal with him, he would be in equally great danger. But Wang Chong could not retreat, nor would he retreat. He had to investigate the matter of the apocalypse. There was a faint laugh in the air, and then there was no more sound. Wang Chong was well aware that since the high priest had decided to keep the secret, he would not tell him. Then what's with that underground tide of energy? Wang Chong asked once more. There are some things that exist far beyond the history of humanity. That ball of energy has existed for tens of thousands of years. The Hyderabad mountains you see now, including the special or within, exist precisely because of it. Tens of thousands of years have subtly influenced it to produce such a unique thing, and you have already seen it for yourself. You can dig up the ore in the mountains as you please, but with your abilities, you cannot approach the energy underground. Moreover, that ball of energy is very unstable and could explode at any moment. This is also why I have been standing guard here and stopping you. The high priest said, What? Hearing these words, Wang Chong almost stood up in shock. Hyderabad, or rather Wuxi steel, was the most unique weapon in the world. Even meteoric iron could not compare to it. This was something that Wang Chong had always known. But he had never imagined that, according to the high priest, the reason for the existence of the Hyderabad mountains, and even the unique veined Wuxi steel, was entirely because of the destructive energy he had sensed underground. How is this possible? Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. If what the high priest said was true, then it was too shocking. Leave. After a long silence, the high priest's voice resounded in the cave once more. I've already made an exception and told you too many things. I've told you all that I can. As for the rest, even if you ask me, I won't answer. You can only rely on yourself to figure everything out. With these last words, the cave fell silent, and not a single sound could be heard. High priest, Wang Chong called out twice, but there was no response from the cave. Wang Chong knew that this time, the high priest would really not answer any more questions. After staying in the cave for a while, Wang Chong finally sighed, stood up, and walked towards the door. Wait. Just as Wang Chong walked to the door, unexpectedly, the space loosened, and a square iron box suddenly flew out from the darkness. Under the influence of an invisible force, it flew in front of Wang Chong. At first glance, this iron box looked simple and ordinary, but when Wang Chong stretched out his hand to catch it, a heavy force came from his hand, as if he was not holding a small box, but a heavy cauldron. The moment Wang Chong caught it, several sharp spikes suddenly extended from the bottom of the box and pierced through Wang Chong's fingers. The drops of blood were quickly absorbed into the box, and the top of the box suddenly began to shine with a hazy light. Then, it rapidly grew lighter, as if it were nothing in his hand. This is... Wang Chong immediately stopped, a look of shock on his face. This item can help you, so you have to protect it well. This is also a gift for helping Sind. The high priestess' voice disappeared very quickly. This time, it was really silent and there was no sound at all. After a few moments of silence, Wang Chong took the square box and walked out. But in a flash of light, a boundless starry sky suddenly appeared before his eyes. Alarmed, Wang Chong turned his head and realized that he was standing on the summit of the Hyderabad mine. The surroundings were quiet. Other than Wang Chong, there were only the craggy rocks shrouded in the darkness. Everything was like a dream, as if it was just an illusion. But a breeze ruffled his hair, and when he felt the texture of the metal box in his hand, Wang Chong immediately realized that this was no illusion. Wang Chong stood on the summit in a daze, not moving for a long time. After a few moments, Wang Chong finally waved his sleeve and flew back to his residence. Everything had returned to normal, and Wang Chong was well aware that it would be a very long time before he could see that mysterious high priest again. When Wang Chong returned to the metal palace he had built on the mountain, deep underground, across from the cave Wang Chong had stayed in, several plumes of dust suddenly fell to the ground. Something seemed to blink behind the dust, and then it slowly opened. It was a pair of human eyes. No one had ever seen such a pair of eyes. They were old and profound, imbued with the mark of time, as if all the secrets were hidden within them. Is all of this fate? I didn't think that after so many twists and turns, the child of destiny would actually come to Sindhu. This is all I can help you with. The rest will depend on your own luck. The high priest murmured to himself. Very soon he closed his eyes and all the sounds disappeared. It was as if nothing had happened. A few moments later, Wang Chong returned to his room. The two candles were still quietly burning. The length of the candle clearly indicated that Wang Chong had only been gone for a few moments. After closing the door, Wang Chong muttered to himself for a few moments, and then he took out the square metal box. Chapter 12:23. I only asked the high priest about the secret of the God's eye. Why did he give me a metal box? What is the meaning of this? In the candlelight, Wang Chong carefully examined the metal box in his hand. It was gray and lacked any luster. It looked like it was made of the simplest iron embryo. It did not arouse any interest at all. But soon, Wang Chong's attention was focused on a crystal the size of a pinky finger on top of the metal box. This was the only part of the metal box that could attract Wang Chong's attention. That misty brilliance was emitted from this crystal. What does the high priest mean by this? Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. He tried all kinds of methods, channeling Gang Qi from all directions, and kept probing, but there was no reaction. Wang Chong tried to probe it with his psychic energy, but the psychic energy entered from one side and immediately came out the other side like air, as if there was nothing in his hand. After dozens of attempts, there was still nothing. Wang Chong could only give up for now. Buzz! A moment later, just as Wang Chong was about to put the metal box aside, suddenly, there was a sudden change. Without the slightest warning, the crystal on top of the metal box suddenly shone brightly, flashing and emitting a strong emerald green light. This is... Wang Chong's eyelids twitched, and he instantly became much more clear-headed. Wang Chong was bewildered. Just as he was surprised by the change in the metal box, suddenly, whoosh, a gust of air blew in. At first glance, Wang Chong did not feel anything, but the next moment, Wang Chong immediately smelled a faint smell in the air. Something's wrong. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately covered his mouth and nose. From this gust of air, Wang Chong felt a strange smell. This was definitely not a normal change in airflow. In the blink of an eye, another gust of air blew in. This time, Wang Chong clearly saw some tiny green particles. Poison. No matter how slow Wang Chong's reaction was, he still understood. A gust of stellar energy burst out of his body and quickly enveloped Wang Chong. Candlelight flickered in the room, and at the same time, the crystal on the metal box in Wang Chong's hand flickered with an intense light. In just a short period of time, more and more green mist poured into the room, and it was getting stronger and stronger. In just a short period of time, the green mist had seeped in through all the cracks in the steel palace. In an instant, the room had turned into a sea of green mist. Do it. A hoarse voice came from outside the room. The next moment, the iron door opened with a bang, and a figure with a black iron mask on his face pounced in like lightning. He turned in midair and immediately pounced towards Wang Chong. Wang Chong coldly snorted and instantly extinguished the candle on the table. At the same time, he flipped his palm and pounced toward the man in black. Ping! The two palms collided, and a powerful suction immediately erupted from Wang Chang's body. The energy of the masked man in black instantly surged like a river into Wang Chang's body. Not good. He wasn't poisoned at all. The eyes of the masked man in black were filled with shock. Quick, do it. There was a flash of light, and the sound of clothes fluttering through the air could be heard. Just as Wang Chong was controlling the hands of the masked man in black, there was a flash of cold light. Two other masked men with swords in their hands flew towards Wang Chong's left and right like phantoms. Wang Chong smiled casually. Gotcha. With a single palm, he threw the masked man in black away. He crashed into the steel wall behind him like a cannonball, and the powerful force directly smashed him into the wall. At the same time, Wang Chong's stellar energy was as tough as steel. The two sword-wielding masked men in black were unable to advance a single inch. Boom! Wang Chong's stellar energy exploded, and a moment later, the two men in black were sent flying like ragdolls with their strings cut, their eyes filled with shock. These people were definitely top-class assassins, but given Wang Chong's current level of cultivation, only an expert of the great general level would be able to threaten him. But things were far from over. As the two men were sent flying, Wang Chong's heart thumped, and he suddenly raised his head. Rumble! Without any warning, the entire ceiling and roof of Wang Chong's steel palace were flung into the air by some invisible energy. Soon after, a shadow flew in and a powerful aura that was as vast as the sea swooped down. Boom! Wang Chong's eyes chilled, and with a flip of his palm, he fiercely collided with the two palms of the descending figure. A fierce gale swept through the surroundings, and at the same time, a thick stream of violet-black flames shot toward Wang Chong. The flames sizzled as they burned the stellar energy. Like the roots of a tree, these tiny flames followed Wang Chong's stellar energy and began to coil around Wang Chong's body. Black smoke immediately began to rise from Wang Chong's body. But before these flames could coil around his body, another stellar energy, as fierce as the sun, exploded from Wang Chong's body and sent the black figure flying. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, the man rolled backwards and immediately landed on the southwest corner of the wall. His whole body was like a spear stuck there, stable and motionless. It's you! Wang Chong's pupils constricted, his eyes turning sharp. The familiar black robes, the familiar energy. These people were identical to the ones who had driven Lu Wu to the Wang clan. One was in the Central Plains, and one was in the distant Sin. Wang Chong had never imagined that these people would chase him all the way to Sin. Buzz! Wang Chong's eyes chilled, and just when he was about to pursue, there was a flash of light. From the other three corners of the room, three figures appeared. The exact same figures, the exact same energy, making it impossible to tell which one was which. Moreover, all four of them exuded the same powerful energy. Wang Chong, you really shouldn't have come here. At this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly rang out in the night sky. The voice was erratic, making it impossible to tell which of the four people had spoken. You managed to escape last time, but you might not be able to this time. Another voice spoke up again. As soon as the voice fell, the four of them attacked together. Boom! In a flash of light, the four of them used the exact same technique, unleashing a torrent of surging stellar energy. The energy exuded by these four black-clothed assassins was suffocating. The attacks of the four were fast, but Wang Chong's counterattack was even faster. Boom! In a flash of light, the sun and moon appeared at the same time, the blazing sun rapidly expanding and engulfing Wang Chong in its radiance. The stellar energy of the four collided with Wang Chong's sun, but not only were they unable to advance, they began to twist, spin, and then vanish into nothingness. In the Battle of Talas, when he and his master, the evil emperor, had used the highest level of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art to kill Kuteba, Wang Chong's understanding of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art had greatly increased. Wang Chong could now use both Yin and Yang at will, reaching a level where he could move them as freely as his own arm. But before the first wave had even subsided, the moment Wang Chong had vanquished it, there was a flash of fire, and the strange black and violet flames began to pour out like a river, engulfing Wang Chong from all sides. In a flash, Wang Chong's stellar energy began to burn and sizzle as it corroded Wang Chong's body. The black and violet flames once more began to spread uncontrollably through Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong's stellar energy was of no use against them. With the four of them working together, it took only a few moments for Wang Chong's stellar energy to be reduced by 1/20th. Great shattering art! Just when the four streams of violet energy were about to enter Wang Chong's meridians, Wang Chong immediately exploded with destructive energy. A terrifying energy darker than the darkness, so dark that not even light could penetrate it, exploded from Wang Chong's body. Boom! This destructive energy immediately sent the four of them flying, and the black and violet flames that had invaded Wang Chong's body came to a screeching halt. It's this flame again! Wang Chong's eyes turned cold. This energy gave him a very similar feeling to the strength of Lu Wu, but it was even more tyrannical. This isn't the strength of Lu Wu that you encountered back then. This is a flame specifically designed to suppress you. No matter how strong you are, even if you've broken into the great general level, you still won't be able to stop it. The leader of the black-clothed assassins spoke once more, but his voice was so erratic that it was impossible to guess who had spoken. As soon as they finished speaking, the four top-notch black-clothed assassins spread their fingers, and in an instant, four towering purplish-black flames shot out. This violet and black light painted the summit in a bewitching violet, giving off an extremely bizarre feeling. The strength of Lu Wu. This was a power even stronger than the strength of Lu Wu. This corrosive energy completely ignored the opponent's cultivation, and not even a great general could stop it. This was the special gift they had prepared for Wang Chong. Go! Without the slightest hesitation, the four of them moved, leaving afterimages in their wake. The violet-black flames in their hands swelled to several dozen times their original size, drawing out the outline of countless craggy rocks in the darkness. Bang! The violet-black flames blotted out the heavens and earth, attacking Wang Chong from every angle. The four of them coordinated their attacks so well that they left no room for Wang Chong to retreat. The strength of Lu Wu was their strongest move. With this terrifying flame, they had already killed many powerful foes, including an imperial great general. Wang Chong would not be able to stop them. Chapter 12:24. The Stellar Energy Piercer. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong instantly activated this powerful ability. The Stellar Energy Piercer is not a technique that only you people know. Wang Chong sneered, instantly shattering the assassin's heart. The purplish-black flames ignored stellar energy defenses, and this ability was similar to Wang Chong's Stellar Energy Piercer to a certain extent. These black-clothed assassins used the purplish-black flames to corrode Wang Chong's meridians, but for Wang Chong, it was far less troublesome, and he killed one of the assassins with a single strike. This is impossible! Seeing this scene, the three assassins behind him were completely dumbfounded. Wang Chong's attack was too fast, and the assassin fell even faster. This was completely different from what they had expected. Kill him! The three's eyes turned bloodshot, and they quickly lunged at Wang Chong. At the same time, there was a fierce shout, and the other two assassins wielding sharp swords became one with their swords. Like two bolts of lightning, they attacked Wang Chong together. And just above them, there was a flash of light, and someone seemed to be waving a bag. Immediately, a thick green mist, along with the wind, swept toward Wang Chong. "You're courting death!" A cold light flashed in Wang Chong's eyes. Clang! Before the others could react, a golden light exploded out of thin air, instantly piercing through the layers of space and piercing through the assassin in black who was in the middle of applying poison. Puff puff! The assassin's throat slid, and he instantly fell to the ground, motionless. And almost at the same time, there was a flash of light, and Wang Chong split into three. Three identical figures appeared at the top of the Hyderabad mountain range. Seeing this scene, the three assassins in black shuddered. Even with their cultivation, they were completely unable to distinguish whether the three Wang Chong were real or fake. "Don't worry about it, attack together." The three of them were startled for a moment before they attacked without hesitation. There was a flash of light, and a sizzling sound could be heard in the air. Three huge purplish-black flames burst out in an instant. Each flame was expanding rapidly, expanding the area it covered to the limit. This way, no matter which Wang Chong was real, they would all be attacked. In the minds of the three of them, regardless of whether Wang Chong was real or an illusion, they would be able to quickly distinguish it. However, the development of the matter was completely different from what they had imagined. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, there was a shrill scream. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the three illusions of Wang Chong were destroyed at the same time. Behind one of the assassins, a slender figure suddenly appeared. 5 fingers were like iron pincers, clamping down on the assassin's neck and lifting him up from the ground. White Tiger! It's that kid! Everyone immediately recognized that the figure behind the assassin was none other than Wang Chong. Stellar energy surged around his body as he pushed the great yin-yang heaven creation art to its limits. Violet energy surged out of the assassin's body and into Wang Chong's. With the help of this violet energy, Wang Chong's energy swelled, and a majestic vitality erupted from his body. Violet light also erupted from Wang Chong's body. Not good. This bastard is absorbing the Jubai energy. Seeing this scene, the black-clothed men turned pale with fright. The violet flames of the Jubai energy were so intense that not even great generals could resist them. But if Wang Chong was able to control this power, they would lose the ability to fight against Wang Chong. Although Wang Chong was powerful, he was not scary, and his illusion power was nothing to be afraid of. But if Wang Chong absorbed the Jubai energy and possessed the same violet-black flames as them, they would no longer have the power to fight against Wang Chong. This was the power of the great yin-yang heaven creation art. Boom! The air rumbled as the men in black anxiously charged at Wang Chong. But it was too late. The black-clothed assassin that Wang Chong had restrained began to pour his violet-black energy into Wang Chong's body, fusing with the power of Lu Wu in Wang Chong's body. Aya! The assassin screamed as his flesh and energy surged into Wang Chong's body like a punctured balloon. The surrounding men in black had only taken a few steps before Wang Chong had sucked away all the Jubai energy in the assassin's body. What a powerful strength! Wang Chong stood where he was, and with a thump he tossed the corpse of the assassin to the ground. Wang Chong half closed his eyes as he silently sensed the new energy in his body. Although the great yin-yang heaven creation art had absorbed many kinds of energy, none of them had given Wang Chong such a domineering and fierce feeling. It seemed unstoppable and could incinerate all, but it was also brimming with life energy. Wang Chong had only been absorbing it for a few moments, but he could already sense that the cells in his body had been greatly strengthened. This tyrannical energy filled Wang Chong's mind, making Wang Chong feel like he had to spit it out. Rumble! In a flash of light, 2 violet-black flames brimming with destructive energy, 3 sharp swords, and surging torrents of stellar energy rained down on Wang Chong's body, completely annihilating him. Is he dead? The surrounding black-clothed men were bewildered. They had thought that they would have to struggle for some time and had not expected to succeed so easily. But in the next moment, there was a boom as the violet-black flames scattered, revealing Wang Chong's figure. His body was brimming with stellar energy, and he had not been weakened in the slightest. In front of him, 2 divine swords floated in the air, several inches away from Wang Chong, completely unable to advance. At this moment, Wang Chong's expression was icy, his long hair flying in the wind. He was like a demon god in the darkness. Not good. Seeing this, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. An intense sense of danger surged over them like a tide, causing their scalps to go numb. This feeling was suffocating. Buzz. The crowd madly fled. If they could not even deal with Wang Chong with the power of Jubai, then they had already lost all means to deal with Wang Chong. Do you think you can run? An icy voice suddenly resounded in their ears. The black-clothed men had reacted very quickly, and they had all fled in different directions, but they were still too slow. Bang bang bang. In a flash of cold light, several black-clothed men fell to the ground at almost the same time. 2 had been pierced by swords, 2 had been burned to ash by violet-black flames, and 2 had been turned into dried corpses by Wang Chong's great yin-yang heaven creation art. Wang Chong threw the dried corpses to the ground and turned his head to look at the last black-clothed man. The latter trembled, a trace of fear on his face, but he quickly regained his composure and sneered, "Don't bother. Don't bother. I won't tell you anything." As the man spoke, he clenched his teeth. In the blink of an eye, a thick black flame burst out from his body. In the blink of an eye, the man in black was burned to ashes. At this sight, Wang Chong relaxed his fingers, the chill in his eyes dispersing. Even though he had seen this many times before, Wang Chong was still helpless against the suicidal methods of these black-clothed men. Whenever these black-clothed men were captured, they would burn themselves to ash without hesitation, not giving Wang Chong the slightest chance. But in the blink of an eye, Wang Chong came back to his senses. At the same time, he could hear the sounds of fighting. Kyle! Standing on the summit, one could see that the Hyderabad mountains were ablaze with flames and thick plumes of smoke. In the darkness, countless people had infiltrated the Hyderabad mountains and were carrying out assassinations. Just what are these people up to? As the wind howled in his ears, countless thoughts flitted through Wang Chong's mind. He simply couldn't understand why these men in black had appeared here. After harming so many people and chasing them all the way to Sindh, they had slaughtered their way through. Was it all just to kill him? Rumble. Amidst his bewilderment, the world suddenly swayed. An enormous energy erupted like a volcano, erupting from the earth and shaking the entire Hyderabad mountains. Under the influence of this terrifying power, the entire Hyderabad mountain range and the ground beneath their feet began to shake violently. Wang Chong grimaced as he vaguely realized something. This direction was clearly coming from the underground high priest. In a flash, Wang Chong found it hard to maintain his composure. These black-clothed men had come too suddenly. Wang Chong had never imagined that even the Sindh high priest would be under their attack. And what was even more unbelievable was that the high priest's residence was extremely well hidden. The terrain of the mountain range was so complex that even Wang Chong had only been able to find the high priest by chance, and he had even been summoned by the high priest. Just how had these people found the high priest, and this energy? How could there be such a powerful existence? As Wang Chong was worrying, a scream came from the ground, and then the quaking of the mountain range ceased. The earth quickly regained its calm, and all was quiet once more. Wang Chong gave a long sigh of relief. That scream clearly didn't come from the high priest. It's clear that the high priest won in this intense contest. But as he relaxed, Wang Chong felt an indescribable feeling. I didn't think that the high priest would have such a powerful cultivation. From that attack just now, he could tell that the high priest's cultivation was far above that of a peak great general. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly calmed down and began to descend the mountain. There were still many men in black wreaking havoc. Even the Wushang cavalry Wang Chong had left at the base of the mountain were being attacked. Chapter 12:25. His sword shot through the air like a bolt of lightning, piercing through the bodies of 2 black-clothed men, then 3, 4, 10, 20. When Wang Chong joined the battle, he was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Wherever he went, black-clothed assassins fell one after another. In just an hour, at least 100 black-clothed men had died at Wang Chong's hands. 2 hours later, all of the fighting was over. The entire Hyderabad mountain range was littered with the corpses of black-clothed men, and the majority of those who had died were the miners who had been slaughtered in the mines. Marquis, what should we do with these people? At the foot of the mountain, Li Sai's right foot was stepping on the back of a black-clothed man, his expression extremely furious. The ambush had happened too suddenly, and the martial arts of these black-clothed men were completely different from the martial arts of the army. They were vicious and ruthless, and many people had died in the ambush. However, the black-clothed men had also paid a price. Not only had a considerable number of people been killed, but Li Sai had also led a group of people to capture a portion of them. Marquis, I'll have some people splash some water on them to wake them up and interrogate them. Let's find out where these people came from. Xue Qianjun said angrily. Wait a moment. Wang Chong waved his hand and hurriedly stopped Xue Qianjun. The group led by Li Sai had only managed to knock them unconscious by coincidence. Once they were awakened, they would basically all commit suicide. Let me handle this matter. With a thought from Wang Chong, a powerful wave of mental energy immediately burst forth, rushing into the mind of one of the black-clothed men like a tide. As expected, Wang Chong very quickly encountered a seal in the mind of this black-clothed man. As expected, Wang Chong nodded in his mind. These black-clothed men were extremely strict in their control, and they would not leave any openings. This was indeed the case. Although he encountered a layer of obstruction, the strength of this layer of obstruction was not strong. In just a moment, Wang Chong broke through this layer of restriction. How is it, Mai? Have you found out where these people came from? Footsteps came from behind him. The king of Gonka walked over and asked softly. Wang Chong shook his head and cast a glance at the men in black who had fainted on the ground in a row. Take off their masks. Everyone was surprised when they heard this. They didn't understand what Wang Chong meant. Xue Qianjun quickly walked over, bent down, and removed the mask of one of the black-clothed men. These are Khorasani. Looking at the face under the mask with wavy hair, hawk-like eyes and a tall nose, everyone looked at each other in shock. He then removed a second and third mask, revealing a wide variety of faces. Khorasani, Uzan, Western Turks, Chechekian, and even Sindhi. Everyone was stunned by these faces. These people are all assassins of the lowest level. They don't know many secrets. Wang Chong indifferently said. Psychic energy had obtained very few clues, and based on what he had gathered, they knew almost nothing. Li Sai and the king of Gonka had not been of much help in capturing these people. Li Sai, take them away. After saying this, Wang Chong shot off in another direction. In the middle of the Hyderabad mountains, in a collapsed mine, Wang Chong met with Ablanadin, Arloja, and the substitute high priest in front of that crude temple. His aura was somewhat chaotic, as if he had just experienced a major battle. Venerable Master, how is it? Wang Chong walked over, a look of concern on his face. I'm fine. They were all beaten off and only suffered some light injuries. But, what a pity! The substitute high priest turned his head and gave a long sigh as he gazed at the piles of corpses and the bloody mist in the air. Wang Chong fell silent. There was nothing he could do about this. The miners of the Hyderabad mountains were almost all ordinary people with weak constitutions. There were not many experts among them. Although Wang Chong had done his utmost to stop them, he had been unable to change anything. In addition, how is the high priest doing? Wang Chong asked. The tremors deep underground had left him rather uneasy. The high priest is fine. He had long ago predicted that Marquis would ask this question, so he had us wait here. The substitute high priest bowed to Wang Chong. In addition, the high priest asked me to pass on a message to you. Fate comes and goes and fate comes and goes. Everything has its own destiny. He has already told you what he should tell you. Almsgiver, don't be so stubborn. Before Wang Chong could ask for more details, the substitute high priest cut off all of Wang Chong's questions. Marquis, no one can change the high priest's mind once he has decided on something. If he says he won't see you, he definitely won't. There's nothing we can do about it. Arloja and Ablanov said. Wang Chong stood there in a daze for a long time without saying anything. Although he was very unwilling, he had no choice but to give up. Understood. Thank you. After Wang Chong said this, he looked around him deeply. He knew that the high priest would definitely be able to hear his words. With a flash of light, Wang Chong quickly leaped outside and disappeared. The night attack ended very quickly. No one knew where the black-clothed men came from, and no one knew why they launched the attack. Everything was a blank. Several days later, after bidding farewell to the substitute high priest, Wang Chong left behind half of the Wushang cavalry to guard the Hyderabad mountains while he set off for Khorasan with the other half. Around 7 or 8 days later, Wang Chong finally arrived at Khorasan. How is it? Have they all been eliminated? Reporting to Marquis, following Marquis's orders, we eliminated all the men in black. Alas, we didn't get any useful information out of them. Li Sai bowed as he heard a voice by his ear. On his way back from the Hyderabad mountains, Wang Chong had noticed many men in black who had been following him. They had assumed all sorts of identities and were constantly around Wang Chong. But not even these men in black could have imagined that no matter how they disguised themselves, they could not escape Wang Chong's eyes and ears. Along the way, Wang Chong gradually realized that the unremarkable metal box the high priest had given him could accurately sense the auras of these men in black. No matter who they were or how they disguised themselves, as long as they got close to Wang Chong, they would be discovered. And the closer they got and the stronger they were, the more intensely the crystal on the top of the box would flash and glow. Combined with the stone of destiny in Wang Chong's mind, which could display the surrounding terrain, Wang Chong could even accurately sense where these men in black were lying in ambush. Wang Chong nodded. Although he didn't know why the high priest had such a thing, there was no doubt that this metal box would allow him to guard against those men in black. Putting aside the matter of the men in black, Wang Chong rode his horse and led his army back to the lord of the city residence. In a little more than half a month, Khorasan had undergone a major transformation. As far as Wang Chong could see, the warlike atmosphere of the city had been swept away, and the entire city was thriving. As he walked along the streets, he could see that the faces of the people were also brimming with joy. And the greatest transformation was on the streets. In this foreign city tens of thousands of li away from the Tang dynasty, many of the faces of the Tang people of the Central Plains had begun to appear. Their clothes were embroidered with the insignia of various great clans, and they were selling silk, tea, porcelain, and all sorts of exquisite handicrafts from the Central Plains. Marquis Lord Feng truly is formidable. Those Khorasani were very respectful and full of smiles when trading with us Tang people. It seems like the Khorasani have already completely accepted us. Xue Qianjun excitedly walked over from the rear. Khorasan was a foreign land, and they had never encountered anything here before. For Feng Changqing to be able to manage this place to this extent in such a short time was truly an incredible feat. Wang Chong said nothing, only gave a slight nod. Compared to that, he was more concerned about something else. Seated on the white-hoofed shadow, Wang Chong turned his head in another direction, where a Chinese-style school had been erected. The faint sounds of reading came from the school, not in the Khorasani language that the people here were most familiar with, but in the language of the Tang dynasty. These voices were extremely unrefined, but they were brimming with passion. A seed had been planted, and it had already sprouted. In the future, these seeds might spread throughout all of Khorasan and completely alter the fate of the Tang dynasty and this land. Boom! As he was thinking, the earth suddenly quaked and the clopping of hooves could be heard. Wang Chong raised his head and saw that Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, and Banahan were riding over on their horses. Ha, Wang Chong, how was it? Did your trip to Sind go smoothly? Gao Xianji led the way toward Wang Chong. He seemed to be in a very good mood. Lord Protector General. Wang Chong faintly smiled as he rode forward. Wang Chong, your strategy was truly effective. Everything in Khorasan is on the right track. In addition, the first group of soldiers sent by the imperial court has already arrived at Khorasan, and the rest have already arrived at Samarkand. I trust that they will arrive soon. Gao Xianji stroked his beard and chuckled. The more he looked at Wang Chong, the more he liked him. Whether it was in politics, military affairs, logistics, government affairs, or any other aspect, Wang Chong was someone he had never seen before. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would have found it very difficult to believe that a 17-year-old youth could be so talented. Wang Chong had not only saved his life, but also the entire Anxi Protectorate army. To Gao Xianji, Wang Chong was definitely a friend who had gone through thick and thin with him. If anyone dared to act against Wang Chong, Gao Xianji would be the first to step forward and say no. I've already written a memorial recording all your achievements and sent it to the imperial court. I trust that it won't be long before the imperial court announces your reward. If not for you, we would never have been able to reach Khorasan. I'm confident that the imperial court will reward you handsomely. And I've heard that the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Personnel are already discussing how to reward you after this battle, and even the matter of your title. Chapter 12:26. Lord Protector General's praise is too much. As a general, leading an army to conquer the border and achieve great feats is part of my duty. What is there to reward? Wang Chong indifferently said, his expression extremely calm. Whether it was the Battle of Nanzhao or the Battle of Talas, Wang Chong did not care about these things. Winning the Battle of Talas and resolving an invisible crisis was what Wang Chong cared about. Let's go, Wang Chong said. With these words, he led the way out of the room. One reason for his return from Sindhu was that the matter of the Hyderabad ore had been resolved. The other reason was that Wang Chong had received a letter from Feng Changqing from Khorasan. Just how is the matter in Khorasan going? Upon reaching the Lord's Hall in Khorasan, Wang Chong got straight to the point. There were no outsiders in the room, and the people in this room were essentially the upper echelon of the Tang dynasty. The smile on Feng Changqing's face faded, and his brow sank. Everything is as Lord Protector General predicted. Without the great enemy of Arabia, Khorasan is on the right track, but a few hidden problems are gradually beginning to reveal themselves. Although the various rebel armies are still very respectful of our Tang dynasty, they are no longer as harmonious with each other. In this period of time, I've already received reports of conflicts between the rebel armies. Our warriors do not speak the same language and have very special identities. If we recklessly interfere, we will inevitably be accused of favoring one side and being unfair to the other side. Not only that, the leaders of the rebel armies have also begun to disagree with each other. Although they appear to be at peace on the surface, undercurrents are surging beneath the surface, and they are no longer as united as before. Feng Changqing made no attempt to conceal his concern. He could deal with political affairs, but the affairs of the rebel armies were far from as simple as right and wrong. Wang Chong, this is not a good omen. If we don't properly deal with this matter, the coalition army will quickly fall apart. Gao Xinji said worriedly. In truth, the Tang dynasty did not have many soldiers in Khorasan. 80% of the more than 200,000 soldiers in the army were rebels. If this matter was not handled properly, the Tang dynasty would lose its hard-won gains. Without the help of these rebel armies, the Tang dynasty would never have been able to resist the Arabian Empire so close to Baghdad. I have already done my best to assist Lord Feng in dealing with this matter, but it is truly difficult. Su Hanshan also spoke up. So all the things I said back then have happened? Wang Chong said calmly. Before leaving Khorasan, Wang Chong had left a letter for Feng Changqing, mentioning that if any of those things happened in Khorasan, Feng Changqing had to be informed to return as soon as possible. And now, Wang Chong's predictions had all come true. A man without foresight would have immediate worries. The threat of the Arabs had been temporarily removed, but the internal conflicts were far more difficult to deal with. That's right. Although the situation isn't obvious right now, there are already signs. If we can't think of a solution in time, it'll only get worse, and then it'll be too late. Feng Changqing sighed. All of them had the experience of dealing with these matters while the political, military, and bureaucratic systems were stable and mature. But Khorasan was a foreign territory, and none of them, including the entire Tang dynasty, had much experience in dealing with the Khorasani and rebels who did not speak the same language. I've already thought of a way to resolve this matter. Wang Chong calmly said, Lord Protector General, Lord Feng, inform Bahram that the Tang dynasty will help them rebuild the Sassanid dynasty. Rumble. Wang Chong's words were like a stone thrown into a ripple. Everyone in the hall was stunned by these words. The Sassanid dynasty was an ancient empire that had been destroyed by the Arabs 10-some years ago. Wang Chong actually wanted to rebuild this ancient empire after such a long time? Wang Chong, have you thought about whether His Majesty will agree? Gao Xinji asked in shock. All of you have already seen the problem with the coalition army. If we don't do this, the entire alliance will quickly crumble. Rebuilding the Sassanid dynasty will not only allow the Tang dynasty to gain a firm foothold here, it will also win over the hearts of the people and raise its prestige. In addition, we can also use this method to support the small countries on the border of Arabia in establishing their own countries. In this way, we can move 1,000 pounds with little effort. While we don't have to expend much of our own soldiers, we can reduce Arabia's national strength to the minimum. This is the true way to deal with Arabia once and for all. In addition, this method can also eliminate the problems within the coalition army. In addition, even if we support the Sassanid dynasty, we can continue to station our soldiers here, and even carve out a camp for ourselves in Khorasan. Wang Chong indifferently said, "In that other world, vassal states and garrisons were an extremely mature method. There were not many casualties and one could maintain an enormous influence. Using this method, the Tang dynasty could mobilize the strength of all the rebel armies in Khorasan at any time, even stronger than the current method. This was because the Tang dynasty had provided Khorasan and the other rebel armies with the ability to resist the Arabs. This was the best method at the moment." At Wang Chong's words, Gao Xianji and the others in the hall appeared much better. "Wang Chong, although I don't know if this is right or wrong, there's no better method right now. Let's do as you say. No matter what, this is better than losing Khorasan," Gao Xianji said. In the hall, they discussed many details, and the news quickly reached Bahram's ears. "What?" Bahram excitedly stood up from his seat at this news. As the highest commander of the Aswaran cataphracts and the highest-ranking great general of the Sassanid dynasty, Bahram had a composed and steady personality, but in the face of this shocking news, he could no longer maintain his composure. Rebuild the Sassanid dynasty. This was something that Bahram had never even dared to think about. As long as the Arabian Empire existed, the Sassanid dynasty would never be able to establish a state, but deep in his heart, this truly was what Bahram and countless Khorasani desired the most. Ever since the destruction of their kingdom, countless Khorasani had been startled awake from their dreams and wept in their sleep. "Milords, Bahram does not know what to say. Bahram and all the people of Khorasani will forever remember the kindness of Milords and the Tang dynasty." Bahram's eyes were red, and the other Khorasani were also agitated. "Zamoy, quickly inform Her Royal Highness and tell her this news." The word princess caused Wang Chong and Gao Xianji to glance at each other in shock. The two of them had always known of the existence of the Sassanid imperial household, but none of them had expected it to be a princess. "Many thanks, milords." A few moments later, an extremely beautiful and delicate girl with the distinctive features of Khorasani and long, wavy hair appeared before them. She respectfully bowed to Wang Chong and Gao Xianji. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji looked at this Sassanid princess, a hint of amazement in their eyes. This princess of the Sassanid imperial family was noble and elegant, possessing a breathtaking beauty. Her gentle and delicate aura made others feel an intense desire to protect her. Upon seeing this girl, the two finally understood why Bahram and all the Khorasani had guarded her so closely. There is no need for princess to be so polite. Khorasan and the Tang dynasty are firm allies, and this is what we should be doing, Gao Xianji said. The stunningly beautiful Sassanid princess nodded and then turned to Wang Chong. "There is also General Wang. Adia has heard of General's great name before, but I didn't think that General Wang would be so young." As Adia spoke, she glanced at Wang Chong, her large and round eyes flashing with a strange emotion. At this moment, Adia exuded such an astonishing beauty that even Gao Xianji and Bahram were dumbfounded. Wang Chong's heart thumped as he hurriedly returned the bow. "Princess is too kind." After leaving the room, Gao Xianji glanced at Wang Chong and couldn't help but smile. "Lord Protector General, congratulations. It seems that it won't be long before you become the Sassanid dynasty's son-in-law, perhaps even a prince or emperor of the Sassanid dynasty. Lord Gao." Wang Chong could hear the ridicule in Gao Xianji's words, and he was infuriated. On the other side, Gao Xianji knew when to stop, heartily laughing as he left. Meanwhile, in the room, Bahram watched Sassanid Princess Adia's departing figure with a pensive look in his eyes. The princess has already grown up and has someone she likes. This young marquis of the Tang dynasty is handsome, valiant, and extremely decisive. Most importantly, he is still unmarried. If the Sassanid dynasty can be rebuilt, marrying the princess to him is not a bad idea. The news that the Sassanid dynasty was being rebuilt in Khorasan shook the entire Western world. The entire region to the west of the Tsong Mountains, including the Arabian Empire, was rocked by landslides and tsunamis. As the strongest empire that had once existed on the border of Arabia, the Sassanid dynasty was undoubtedly an extremely powerful foe of the Arabian Empire. Bastard! Upon receiving the news, Mutasim III clenched his hands so tightly that he felt like his fingers were about to break. The Tang dynasty was extremely sinister and wanted to use the Sassanid dynasty to resist Arabia for a long time. He naturally understood this. Damn it. Men, I don't care what price you have to pay, but no matter what, you must tear that Tang dynasty's Wang Chong to pieces. With Mutasim III's voice, the Arabian Empire began to turn like a machine. But with Wang Chong's current level of cultivation and strength, even in the Arabian Empire, it would be very difficult to find an existence that could deal with him. Chapter 1227. In addition, the Tang dynasty, as an ally, donated 10 million taels of gold to the Sassanid imperial household. The Sassanid dynasty returned the favor, choosing 2 large regions in the northeast and southwest of Khorasan as permanent garrisons for the Tang army. The Tang dynasty had absolute authority over these regions, and not even the Sassanid imperial household had the right to intrude. Not only that, out of respect and gratitude for the Tang dynasty, Bahram and the newly established Sassanid dynasty bestowed upon the Tang dynasty a supreme authority. At any time, as long as the Tang dynasty wished, it could mobilize all the soldiers of Khorasan, including the Aswaran cataphracts. Handing control of the Aswaran cataphracts over to the Tang dynasty was something that had never happened before. The firmness of the alliance between the Tang dynasty and Khorasan left everyone stunned. And as a backing, the Tang dynasty displayed its formidable ability as a backer. The day after the Sassanid dynasty was re-established and began recruiting soldiers, the Tang dynasty began to forge a large number of armor and weapons for the Sassanid dynasty. At the same time, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji selected 70-some of their most experienced generals to assist the Sassanid dynasty in training their soldiers. Khorasan had originally only had around 200,000 soldiers, but the Sassanid dynasty's enormous influence allowed it to recruit another 200,000 soldiers. Moreover, they were scattered across the 4 training grounds, where they trained day and night. Although the Sassanid dynasty had once been destroyed, as one of the strongest empires of the Western world, the Khorasani were no less valiant than the Arabs, and in some aspects, they even surpassed them. After a period of training, a new army that had just begun to have combat effectiveness was rapidly taking shape. Khorasan originally had more than 200,000 soldiers, and with this new army, it now had nearly 500,000 soldiers. Even against a powerful foe like Arabia, it now had the ability to protect itself. Everything was on the right track, and with the establishment of the Sassanid dynasty, the coalition army became even more solid. More importantly, with the establishment of the Sassanid dynasty, the internal conflicts within the rebel army had weakened considerably. By relying on the prestige of Bahram and the Sassanid dynasty, the rebellious army was quickly suppressed, and the seeds of unrest were nipped in the bud. Moreover, with the Sassanid dynasty stepping in, the Tang dynasty also avoided the danger of too much interference in the internal affairs of the rebel armies, which would lead to the Tang dynasty becoming enemies with the rebel armies. Not only that, the establishment of the Sassanid dynasty had also given hope to the rebel armies of the other tribes. As long as they could obtain the approval and assistance of the Tang dynasty, they would be able to establish their own empires and dynasties around the Arabian Empire. This was exactly what all the rebels were looking forward to. The establishment of the Sassanid dynasty gave even more rebel leaders hope, and they also saw the modesty and tolerance of the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty's prestige in the region around Arabia and in the rebel army deepened. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. All of Arabia was still immersed in that miserable defeat in the blizzard, and its vitality had yet to recover. For the time being, neither the newly established Sassanid dynasty nor the rebel armies of the other tribes had anything to worry about. And with Wang Chang's help in establishing the Sassanid dynasty, Bahram and the other rebel armies returned the favor. With the support of all sides, the Tang language schools established by Wan Shuyang and his disciples quickly began to blossom on the border of Arabia. And it wasn't just Khorasan. Samarkand, Bokhara, and the surrounding regions of Arabia all had Tang language schools established by Wan Shuyang. Every person who entered the Tang language schools would not only be provided with 3 meals a day, but also a bonus. A month of study in the schools would be equivalent to the income of the lowest paid craftsman. Not only that, the outstanding Khorasani and the rebel armies in the region would also be rewarded handsomely. The temptation of money had caused a large number of students to flood into the schools. In a short time, the number of people studying the Tang language had doubled, going from 3 or 4,000 to 7 or 8,000, and with the construction of new schools, the number was still rapidly increasing. Everything was going according to Wang Chang's plan, and everything was progressing in a good direction. In the marketplace, even the ordinary Khorasani would use some simple Tang language to greet the scions of the great clans, all of them brimming with smiles and brimming with enthusiasm. It had only been a few months, and this was truly inconceivable. Even the who like Banahan and Gully were dumbfounded by Wang Chang's ability to manage the city, and they couldn't help but admire him. As time slowly passed, Wang Chong handled official documents while directing the development of the coalition army. Just when Wang Chong believed that all of this would continue forever, an unexpected matter disrupted Wang Chong's plans. Marquis, Lord Gao requests an invitation. He says that an important guest has come to the city and requests that Milord come to receive him. Several days later, while Wang Chong was engrossed in documents, a soldier of the Anxi Protectorate Army walked in, a respectful expression on his face. "Oh, what kind of important guest requires me to personally receive him? And isn't there Lord Feng?" Wang Chong smiled, not even raising his head. He had left almost all the administrative matters of the city to Feng Changqing, and with the establishment of the Sassanid dynasty and the establishment of a mature bureaucratic system, Wang Chong had an even easier time. "Marquis, this person is an emissary from the imperial court. Lord Feng and the other generals have already gone to the reception hall." The Anxi Protectorate Army soldier said. This time, Wang Chong was surprised. Given the status of Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing, Wang Chong didn't know who was so important that all the soldiers of the Anxi Protectorate Army had to personally receive them. Could it be Geshu Han? But even Geshu Han was probably only on the same level as Gao Xianji, not at this level. Who has come? Wang Chong put down his brush, his curiosity finally piqued. It's a eunuch of the imperial court. His surname is Bian, and his name is Bian Lingqing. The Anxi Protectorate Army soldier spoke the truth, adding a final sentence. He added, "He has come bearing an imperial decree." What? At the mention of Bian Lingqing, Wang Chong's pupils constricted, and he put down his brush and raised his head. Wang Chong had never imagined that he would hear this name at a time like this. "Take me there." Without another word, Wang Chong stood up and left. Before he could even get close to the reception hall, Wang Chong heard a sharp voice from within. "Lord Gao, long time no see. Lord Gao has conquered the Sher Kingdom, defeated Qutayba, and occupied Khorasan. Your future prospects are limitless. It seems like it won't be long before I have to rely on Lord's whims and follow Lord's lead." This voice was imbued with a lofty and aloof tone. Although it called him Lord Gao, there was no respect in its voice. "I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare." The moment the sharp voice finished speaking, 2 voices that Wang Chong was familiar with spoke into the room. "It's Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing." Wang Chong's face instantly darkened. In all the time he had known Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing, Wang Chong had never seen them so polite to anyone. No, this was no longer polite, but reverence and trepidation. Gao Xianji, who had never lowered his head in front of Wang Chong, was now lowering his head in front of that croaky voice, brimming with fear and unease. Of course. I wrote Milord 7 letters, but Milord never replied to a single one. The eccentric voice said. Milord has misunderstood. Gao Xianji was just too busy with military affairs and had no time to reply. Gao Xianji's voice resounded in the reception hall. Wang Chang's brow furrowed deeper and deeper, and he finally couldn't help but push open the door and enter. Within the reception hall, he could see a eunuch dressed in a violet official's robe, seated on a black wooden armchair. He appeared lofty and lofty. Across from him stood Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, and the other generals of Anxi, all of them seemingly extremely apprehensive of this eunuch. When Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, and the others saw the arrogant look on the other party's face, their faces turned even more ashen. However, none of them dared to say a word. It was as if they had to swallow their anger. Buzz! As Wang Chong walked in, the mood in the reception hall suddenly changed. The eunuch who had been sitting on the armchair this entire time suddenly sprang to his feet, and the oppressive Anxi generals imperceptibly breathed a sigh of relief. Wang Chang's eyes flashed like lightning. With a single glance, he understood what was going on. This luxuriously dressed eunuch was undoubtedly Bian Lingqing. Of the three most famous eunuchs of the Tang dynasty, the first was the virtuous eunuch Gao Lisher, who had served at the side of the Holy Emperor for his entire life, ultimately dying to show his loyalty. But the other two were nothing good. One was the treacherous eunuch Li Fugua, who had served at the side of the fifth prince Li Heng, and was still called Li Jingzhong. And the third eunuch was Bian Lingqing. Although he didn't seem to have much of a reputation, he actually possessed immense authority. From a certain perspective, the second eunuch Li Jingzhong was still far from being able to compare to him. The reason was very simple. Bian Lingqing had single-handedly promoted Gao Xianji, who had been suppressed by Tian Renwan and Fomin Linta, and had even helped him ascend to the position of Anxi Protector General. Bian Lingqing was also closely related to Gao Xianji, becoming one of the best great generals of the Tang dynasty, known as the Anxi War God, the Wall of the Empire. In this aspect, Bian Lingqing wasn't that bad of a person. But success was a result of failure. Although Bian Lingqing had helped Gao Xianji ascend to his current position, he had not done it out of kindness. Rather, Gao Xianji had secretly bribed him with a generous gift. This was the only stain on Gao Xianji's youth, and also the greatest stain. Bian Lingqing had taken Gao Xianji's money, and in the end, he had gone around Fomin Linta to write 2 letters to the Holy Emperor, causing the Holy Emperor to take notice of Gao Xianji. Only then had Gao Xianji become a legend. But Bian Lingqing's greed had seeped into his bones. Based on what Wang Chong had learned, Bian Lingqing had been constantly extorting from Gao Xianji, and his appetite was only getting bigger and bigger. Gao Xianji's destruction of the Shi kingdom was admittedly out of strategic necessity, but it was also inextricably linked to Bian Lingqing's demands. The two sides had allied on the basis of profit and parted on the basis of profit. Chapter 12:28. When Wang Chong had learned of this matter, he had been extremely conflicted. In the history of the empire, Gao Xianji had made many mistakes, but he was loyal to the Tang dynasty. No matter what, such a great general should not have died at the hands of such a lowly person. Moreover, Wang Chong only needed a glance to understand what was going on. Not long ago, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji had worked together to obtain 2 billion taels of gold from the Caliph of Arabia. Together with the 700 million taels of gold that they had obtained from the Arabian Empire after their victory at Khorasan, the Tang dynasty army now possessed an astronomical amount of wealth. Someone of Bian Lingqing's personality would assuredly be like a shark that had smelled blood. He had volunteered to take on a mission and run all the way to Khorasan. Young Marquis. As Wang Chong was thinking, Bian Lingqing was all smiles as he walked up to greet Wang Chong. There was none of that arrogant attitude from before. If Wang Chong hadn't heard it before, he would have believed them to be 2 completely different people. Slap. Just as Bian Lingqing was grinning from ear to ear, a slap suddenly landed on his face without warning. Wang Chong's slap had left Bian Lingqing dumbfounded, and Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, and the others in the hall were even more shocked. Bian Lingqing was truly a eunuch, but he was one of the favored people of the Holy Emperor, and he also had the authority of a supervising envoy. This was a power that the Holy Emperor had bestowed upon him so that he could oversee the world and understand the situation on the border. Gao Xianji had been restrained by Bian Lingqing and treated him with such respect. Part of the reason was that Bian Lingqing had been able to blackmail him, but the main reason was also because of this. Bian Lingqing was no ordinary eunuch. You hit me. Bian Lingqing clutched his swollen face, his entire body stupefied as he stared at Wang Chong. Even Gao Xianji had to be polite to him and had never dared to treat him like this. Hee, I heard a fly buzzing outside just now. I'm just swatting a fly for my lord. Is there a problem? Wang Chong smiled and pinched Bian Lingqing's cheek. Gao Xianji was a Hu and had no foundation in the capital, so he had always been patient and accommodating. But Wang Chong was different. He came from a clan of ministers and generals, had a solid foundation, and was also Qixi Protector General, protected by the king of Song and Duke Jiao. At the same time, he was the young marquis personally appointed by the Holy Emperor, a true disciple of the Son of Heaven. To be honest, Wang Chong wasn't really afraid of Bian Lingqing. The power in Bian Lingqing's hands was completely useless in front of Wang Chong. Bian Lingqing's face alternated between green and red. No matter how slow he was, he could tell that Wang Chong was indirectly cursing the locust tree. It was obvious that Wang Chong had heard what he had said to Gao Xianji in the room. Bian Lingqing might have been arrogant and bossy in front of an important figure like Gao Xianji, but in front of the young marquis like Wang Chong, he couldn't muster up any of his authority. Haha, well beaten, well beaten. To everyone's surprise, just when everyone was worried that Bian Lingqing would fly into a rage, a burst of laughter resounded through the air. Not only did Bian Lingqing not get angry, he even bowed to Wang Chong. Now that you mention it, this one must thank the young marquis. Bian Lingqing waved his sleeve, his expression relaxed and carefree. It was like he had not been the one who had been slapped just now, but someone else. Even though Wang Chong knew that this was a treacherous eunuch who hid a dagger in his smile and had a benevolent face but a venomous heart, he couldn't help but feel some respect for him. With this sort of personality and methods, it was no wonder he had the ability to oppose Fomin Linta and force the Anxi Protector General Fomin Linta to Qixi for 10-some years. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing felt even more uneasy at this sight. They had worked with Bian Lingqing for 10-some years and were extremely familiar with him. The more respectful and submissive he was, the more difficult it was to deal with him. Marquis, this is Bian Lingqing, eunuch Bian. He is a favorite of His Majesty and holds the token of the Saint Emperor in his hands. His Majesty has personally appointed him as the general of the palace gates. At the same time, he is also the chief steward of the palace gates. Even eunuch Gao favors him greatly. Cheng Qianli couldn't help but interject. A general's blood was always hot, and they were straightforward and reckless. Even if they crashed into a mountain, they wouldn't turn back. But one also had to see who their opponent was. No one knew why Wang Chong was so hostile to Bian Lingqing in their first meeting. Bian Lingqing was no ordinary eunuch, and the fact that he had been conferred the title of gate supervisor by the Holy Emperor was enough to show how favored he was. It was extremely rare for a eunuch to be conferred the title of general, and it was not without reason that the entire Anxi Protectorate army treated Bian Lingqing with such respect. Whether it was Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, or Cheng Qianli, they were all worried that Wang Chong would offend such a great eunuch in his muddle-headedness. But before Cheng Qianli could finish speaking, Wang Chong waved his hand and gave him a reassuring look. It was one thing for Bian Lingqing to be so arrogant in front of the Anxi Protectorate army, but if he still had such thoughts in front of Wang Chong, he would truly be seeking death. Lord Director has worked hard and performed many meritorious deeds, taking great care of the Anxi Protectorate army. Once I return to the capital and see eunuch Gao, I will definitely give a good account of Lord Director's achievements to Lord Gao. Wang Chong faintly smiled at Bian Lingqing. Bian Lingqing instantly paled at Wang Chong's words. The words eunuch Gao seemed to possess some sort of magical power. Although the generals in the outside world rarely interacted with him, and many had never even heard of him, in the imperial palace, especially among the eunuchs, this name had an extraordinary intimidating effect. This was because this was the true minister of the imperial palace, the head of all the eunuchs. Even someone like Bian Lingqing would feel deep apprehension upon hearing this name. Wang Chong was the young marquis personally appointed by the Holy Emperor, a true disciple of the Son of Heaven. But Bian Lingqing had not expected him to be so capable. From what he said, it seemed like he could meet with First Minister of the Imperial Palace, Eunuch Gao, at any time. More importantly, Gao Lisher was his direct superior. "Milord, this lowly one did not mean that. Milord and Lord Gao have worked hard and performed great deeds for the empire. How could this lowly one dare to disrespect you?" Bian Lingqing's face was ashen, his head drooping even lower. He no longer dared to show any arrogance or disrespect. "Lord Bian, didn't you bring an imperial edict? Hurry and announce it." Wang Chong stared at the imperial edict on Bian Lingqing's back. A eunuch like Bian Lingqing was assuredly a treacherous official, but just like Li Jingzhong at 5th Prince Li Heng's side, after intimidating them, Wang Chong did not intend to immediately kill them. Whether it was Li Jingzhong, the future treacherous minister, or Bian Lingqing, the inspector general, as long as they were used well, they could have positive effects. The only thing that needed to be done was to eliminate them before they could wreak havoc. One's appearance came from one's heart, and one's heart was filled with gold. No one was set in stone, and it depended on how one used it. Thus, Feng Dei was a treacherous official of the Sui dynasty who deceived his superiors and subordinates. But after the Sui destroyed the Tang and established the Tang, he had become an illustrious and meritorious minister in the hands of the current Emperor Taizong. The young Marquis speaks the truth. How could this one forget such an important matter? Bian Lingqing's face was slightly pale as he glanced in Wang Chong's direction, a fearful expression on his face. This time, he was truly a little afraid. Nearby, Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, Cheng Qianli, and the other Anshi generals finally breathed a long sigh of relief at this sight. They had long ago noticed the imperial edict on Bian Lingqing's back, but Bian Lingqing had used it as a threat and refused to speak of the imperial edict, leaving Gao Xianji and the others helpless. In addition, although Bian Lingqing was greedy and loved money, he was still a benefactor to the Anshi Protectorate army. Moreover, Bian Lingqing had a special status. Since ancient times, how many eunuchs had been conferred the title of Inspector General by the Emperor? They were truly afraid that Wang Chong would not let this matter rest and shed all pretense of cordiality with Bian Lingqing. "Lord Bian, let me help you." On the side, Feng Changqing saw the opportunity and shot forward, his hands reaching out to help Bian Lingqing remove the imperial edict from his back. Such a small action immediately eased the atmosphere in the hall by a lot. Bian Lingqing chuckled, instantly feeling much more natural. "Everyone heed my command." Bian Lingqing didn't dare to look at Wang Chong as he unfurled the golden imperial edict in his hand. The 5-clawed golden dragon on the imperial edict was faintly discernible, exuding a dignified and divine aura. Upon seeing this imperial edict, Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, Cheng Qianli, and the other Anshi generals bowed. By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that Anshi Protector General Gao Xianji has persisted at Talas for several months, defeated more than 400,000 Arab soldiers, killed Ibak, Huashu Wizang, and Daluan Ruozan, and commanded the army to break into Khorasan, achieving great feats for the Tang dynasty. Gao Xianji is specially promoted to Left Great General of the Golden Army and made the Duke of Qi. He will enjoy an annual salary of 6,000 dan, be bestowed with the amethyst dragon armor, 5,000 bushels of pearls, countless agate ornaments, and be given a duke's residence. Announce this to the world for all to admire and revere, so as to inspire the people of my Tang dynasty. Cheng Qianli is appointed Deputy Minister of the Imperial Censor with an annual salary of 4,000 dan, a golden scale armor, and 10,000 taels of gold. Feng Changqing is appointed Minister of the Left Guanglu with an annual salary of 4,000 dan and 10,000 bushels of pearls. End of Imperial Decree. Bian Lingqing's expression was solemn, his somewhat shrill voice echoing through the hall. As soon as he finished speaking, all the Anshi generals in the reception hall began to grow excited. "Duke of Qi. His Divine Majesty has bestowed the title of Duke of Qi upon Lord Protector General and Left Great General of the Golden Army. This is a glory that has never happened before." In a flash, everyone in the hall was in an uproar. What sort of honor was this? Before the Battle of Talas, Gao Xianji had been made the prefectural Duke of Miyun. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.